Chapter 483. This seemed to be a collection type of guidance mission. William had marked the major events that had taken place in the City of Dawn over the past 5 years so that the players could understand the history of the City of Dawn. In addition, the locations of the gifts were distributed across the various cities. Not only could players gain a deeper understanding of the local customs and practices of the various cities, but they could also see the armies stationed in each city. Be it in terms of quantity or quality, there was a significant increase. The most shocking thing was that when the players passed by the army camp of the City of Dawn, they saw the Dragonblood Legion training. Even though they were far away, every move and movement had a great impact on the players. They even had various negative buffs. Grandmasters, an army of 5,000 Zongshire Realm Dragon speakers and dragon followers. They were all equipped with dark gold equipment and epic weapons. In addition, the 5,000 Mount Wolves were covered in dragon scales. It showed how powerful this legion was. Many players swallowed hard when they saw their imposing aura. They did not dare to resist. Meanwhile, after the players used their insight, a shiny golden introduction appeared. The legendary legion, the Dragonblood Legion of the City of Dawn, appeared for the first time in the extreme north. This legion has been victorious against the Orc Empire. Within 5 years, they have fought hundreds of battles, big and small. They have not suffered a single defeat and not a single casualty. They have killed 500,000 enemies. Many legendary professionals have commented that the Dawn Dragonblood is one of the top 10 legions in the legendary continent. Gosh, how is that possible? The Dragonblood Legion has not suffered a single casualty in hundreds of battles. Many players could not believe it. They wanted to find a secret skill that allowed them to not die. But more players could not help but exclaim in surprise. Have you realized? Other than the Dragonblood Legion, the other legions do not have such a golden introduction. It seems that Prince William has obtained a legendary legion. It is much stronger than the other legions. There are countless legions in the legendary continent, and the Dawn Dragonblood is one of the top 10. It is undoubtedly a legendary legion. Prince William is awesome. Many players were so shocked that they could not close their legs. After all, the stronger the City of Dawn was, the more benefits they would receive. Everyone had not received the main storyline mission, but the information of the game version had more or less been revealed. The Fourth Era, the beginning of the Endless War. The intention was obvious. The players had played 3 versions and understood what they needed to know. They had more or less understood the settings of the God's world. Now that it was the beginning of the Fourth Era, it was a war between races. The First Era, the Colossal Dragon. The Second Era, the Elves. Humans of the Third Era. Who was the protagonist of the Fourth Era? Undecided for the time being. However, the reason for the war was definitely to become the ruler of an era. Especially since the name of the game version was the beginning of the Infinite Wars, it meant that there would be no lack of killing in the future. Many players were thinking about who would become the true master of the Fourth Era. But after some discussion, they felt that they were thinking a bit too early. This kind of epic war wouldn't be fought for a few hundred years. It was hard to tell who was at the top and who was at the bottom. The most important thing for them was to follow the City of Dawn, which had yet to decline. It was more important for them to profit from the war. After all, according to the players, we might also be the main characters of the Fourth Era, so why should we be so anxious? As time went by, the players also began to understand what they had not experienced in the past 5 years. The prince became a dragon knight, and his mount was called the Dusk Dragon. Next, the City of Dawn invaded the eastern region and quickly captured the Beastmaster Citadel. Moses, the owner of the fortune-telling shop in the City of Dawn, had become a legendary great enchanter and had built a magic tower. It was said that he had mastered many types of magic. 1.5 years after the version update, William became an epic titled expert. His name was Thunderblade. In the following period of time, although His Royal Highness didn't cause any major incidents, but in the war against the Orc Empire, he had killed 8 epic Orc powerhouses. His power was equally terrifying. Many people believed that he had the potential to become a legendary expert or even a sage. Sage. Did you hear that? Prince William has the potential to become a sage. Many players had seen William's terrifying strength and potential. They also understood that a power with a sage was considered a top power. But the players did not expect Prince William to have such a potential. It could be said that, according to the current development trend of the City of Dawn, if William could become a sage without dying, they did not need to change factions. They could play the game until they went bankrupt. D*MN, the protagonist of the legendary continent, has been decided internally. William is definitely the son of the game planner. Forget it. The three major elven races are investing in the City of Dawn. Perhaps William will become the Elven King. I'm not going to change factions, even if you beat me to death. Many players were extremely excited. They felt that Prince William was as powerful as a god who had eaten a deer. Since William had developed the City of Dawn so well, what else could they say? After all, in the eyes of many players, the City of Dawn belonged to their own faction. William was the one who was working for them. He was equivalent to the CEO of a company. Since he was working so hard, the group of shareholders could not run away. The sense of recognition and belonging was off the charts. The City of Dawn had its own secrets. The sudden appearance of the Beast Town surprised the majority of players. Is the Beast Citadel the place that sells magical beasts? I heard that the Dawn Cavalrymen and the Griffin Legion were obtained from the Beast Citadel. Prince William is very smart to snatch it. Many players discovered what the Beast Citadel was after they teleported there. Not only were the streets full of magical beasts, but domesticated magical beasts could also be seen everywhere. There were no mercenaries or idle professionals in the city. Most of the people were members of the beast hunting team. The occupation and working style attracted the attention of the players. It seemed to be a good way to earn money. The occupation of the beast tamer also attracted the attention of many people. Many newbies who wanted to earn money in the future went to the Beast Town in hopes of becoming a beast tamer. When they heard that the Beast Town could buy and sell magical beasts, Lucky Dream and the other rich players also went there. After asking around, their eyes lit up. They rubbed their palms and started to buy their favorite magical beasts at high prices. Yes, ordinary players wanted to buy one. The rich players naturally wanted to buy one for each of them. There are many types of magical beasts. Mounts are the most common, followed by combat-type magical beasts. Leader, how we buy them? Wang Daikong, the vice leader of the Grand Deity team, looked at the exchange list and suddenly asked. Lucky Dream patted his shoulder. Brother, are your family bankrupt? If you are not, of course you will buy them. You don't have to do anything in the future. Just give the order, and the magical beast will do everything for you. Wang Daikong pondered for 2 seconds. Suddenly, he pointed at the introduction book and said, Mount magical beasts are usually incompatible with combat-type magical beasts. It is stated in the book that when they are together, they will easily cause trouble. Besides the beast tamer, no one can control 2 types of magical beasts at the same time. However, there are also some that can be used as mounts or combat-type magical beasts. Haha. Then of course we will buy a magical beast that can be ridden and controlled. Lucky Dream laughed awkwardly and looked at the battle-type magical beast that could be sold. He muttered to himself, Lightning Wolf, Dragon Wolf, Forest Wolf, Dragon Blood Panther, Lion Tiger Beast, Griffin. It's a pity that there are no giant dragons for sale. Don't even think about dragons. Rumor has it that the previous city lord was killed because he sold a fake dragon egg. Even if you have them, you won't be able to afford them. But then again, there are so many types of magical beasts, and the majority are from the ground. Why don't we buy a griffin and fly in the sky? Someone from the Grand Deity team scratched his head, not knowing what to choose. Why don't we buy a dragon wolf? The Dragon Blood Legion's mount. It looks amazing, but only professionals bathed in dragon blood can ride it. At this moment, more and more players were arriving at the Beast Town. The players had thought of raising pets. In other virtual online games, mount systems and pet systems had been introduced a long time ago. However, there were no such things in the world of gods. They couldn't spend money even if they wanted to. Basically, other than hunters, who had a chance to tame a newborn magical beast and make it their pet, other professionals couldn't even think about getting a magical beast. More importantly, even if a hunter raised a magical beast as a pet, they wouldn't dare to let it enter the battlefield. This was because the magical beast stats would not decrease after becoming a pet, and its level would not change. It would still be the same as before. It was as powerful as a wild magical beast. But it also had weaknesses. If it died, it would die. There was no way to revive it. Moreover, there were no healing professions in this world. Mages could at most give buffs, and the healing effects of water mages and priests were too weak. As a result, many hunters did not dare to wander around with their pets when they were on a mission. They were afraid that a pet would die, and that would be a huge loss. But now it was different. They didn't need to tame a pet to buy one. This made many people happy. So the most pleasant surprise in version 4.0 was the rare variety of mounts and magical beasts. Because, other than hunters, other players had finally found a way to own a magical beast as a pet. To many rich players, buying a magical beast of the same level was like raising a boss. Its combat power would increase by a lot, and it would be like an overlord in PK in the wild. Although it was expensive, as long as it was used well, it would be a godly weapon in a guild war. As a result, many ambitious guilds and tycoons were thinking about what kind of pets they should purchase. William secretly laughed. It's great to have players. These defective products can finally be sold. I can make a fortune again. There were many low-level and middle-level magical beasts in the beast taming castle. Nobody bought these magical beasts, and it would be a waste of food if they were given away. He wouldn't let the Dawn army use these defective products, so he kept them to sell to the players. Many beast tamers thought that the lord of the city was crazy because he didn't want to kill them. Hence, despite the complaints of the beast tamers, he managed to accumulate 80,000 to 90,000 low-level and middle-level magical beasts over the past 5 years. But now they should understand that their handsome prince was a handsome boy with great foresight. As for the high-level magical beasts, William planned to sell them at a high price, but not in large quantities. He wanted to let the rich players have some fun. He didn't want to break the balance between the players. D*M*N, I'm doing game planning again. William sighed and stopped paying attention to the players. He sneaked back to the City of Dawn from the beast taming castle to make preparations for the upcoming battle. King Vikru of the Red Fire Kingdom would send him telepathic messages every day, urging him to send reinforcements. This was because the war between the Desert Kingdom and the Red Fire Kingdom was about to start. What was more important was the Desert Kingdom had attracted a group of dwarfs as reinforcements. This put a lot of pressure on the Red Fire Kingdom, and William had no choice but to send reinforcements. Therefore, William decided to send a group of people to the Red Fire Kingdom after the players completed their guiding missions. As for the Darkness invasion in a month, it will be a two-front war. The City of Dawn had millions of soldiers and millions of players. It was no longer a pushover. They could attack whoever they wanted. If they didn't make their enemies scream, they would lose. Chapter 484. In the western region of the Dwarf Kingdom, mountain ranges and plains intersected. The hollowed-out mountain ranges were the capital cities of the Dwarf Kingdom. From high up in the sky, one could see a steel gate that was always open. The cities on the plains were built with white stones. They were the residences of ordinary dwarves. At this moment, in the cities of the Iron Fist Dwarf Kingdom, the sounds of smithing, roars, and armors colliding could be heard. One by one, the gates of the cities opened. Dwarves in pitch-black armor, armed with war hammers and swords, gradually gathered together. The dwarf women and children held hands and looked at their men with complicated gazes as they walked past them. The dwarf warriors did not linger. They sang loud and clear songs and walked steadily towards the battlefield that did not belong to them. Rumble. Behind them, there was a cloud of smoke and dust. 7 or 8 cavalry legions riding magical beast goats, accompanied by the breathing of the dwarven warriors and the running of the goats, quickly overtook these infantry legions and rushed towards the border. The 3 dwarf kingdoms each sent 100,000 soldiers to support the Desert Kingdom. This included the Dwarf Goat Cavalry Legion and their War Chariot Legion. Most of the places where the western region and southern region intersected were plains and deserts. Cavalry. They were the main forces on the battlefield. It was a war between kingdoms. It was about to start. The dwarves were going to participate in the war between the human kingdoms. At the same time, in the Red Fire Kingdom, the Death Legion of the City of Dawn is here, the guard of the teleportation hall suddenly shouted. Then, white lights flashed. The teleportation hall was quickly filled with chosen ones. Many confused NPCs had heard of the Death Legion. They immediately hid in a corner and drew circles. They were afraid of provoking these fearless fellows. When the players heard the name Death Legion, they just laughed and followed Prince William out of the hall like a swarm of bees. At this moment, many guards of the Red Fire Kingdom stood on the street. The leader was none other than the son of Marquis Brian, whom William had saved. 5 years had passed, and Brian, who also had legendary bloodline, had officially become a Marquis. He had reached the epic level. Brian was wearing a helmet and armor, with a long saber hanging from his waist. His appearance was no longer as childish as before. All these years, he was either fighting and killing at the border in the Desert Kingdom, or he was the little Marquis of Royal City's brothel. It seemed that he had grown a lot both physically and mentally. However, when the other guards saw the players, they couldn't help but widen their eyes, trying to figure out how they were different from them and how they could be revived. What happened? Hanging Big Brother? Or not? Probably not. This was because they had never heard of the chosen ones having the habit of going to brothels. More importantly, they were all single men without children or wives. It must be a group of people without a hanger. Otherwise, why would only the chosen one be resurrected? Yes, that must be it. The undead race did not need reproductive organs. When the tall and mighty Brian saw William, he smiled and walked over to give William a big hug. He smiled and said, "It's good that you're here. The domestic border is under great pressure. Without the support of the City of Dawn, we won't be able to withstand the attacks." Isn't that an exaggeration? Didn't King Vikru say that the war would only start after 1 or 2 years? William patted Brian's shoulder, indicating for him to let go of him. Brian nodded and turned to walk alongside William. At the same time, he said, "The Desert Kingdom already knows of our relationship. If the war breaks out, the City of Dawn will definitely come to help." The 5 years of war at the extreme north was their best opportunity. Because the Desert Kingdom doesn't have many reinforcements, the Desert Kingdom was prepared to attack. In the end, due to internal reasons, the Desert Kingdom delayed until now. His Majesty thinks that the Desert Kingdom has missed the opportunity to attack. With your reinforcements, the Desert Kingdom will definitely lose. But among the 7 dwarf kingdoms, the Iron Fist Kingdom, the Harbeard Kingdom, and the Earthfire Kingdom have each sent 100,000 elite soldiers to support the Desert Kingdom. At this point, Brian clenched his fists tightly. These dwarf kingdoms in the western region are next to the Desert Kingdom. They once had business dealings with each other, but I didn't expect them to be able to persuade those stubborn dwarves to send their troops. The 3 dwarf kingdoms sent their troops at the same time. William frowned. He vaguely sensed that this group of dwarves was not that simple, because he vaguely remembered that the 3 dwarf kingdoms had not assisted the Desert Kingdom in his previous life. In addition, the dwarves and the humans did not have a good relationship. To persuade them to send their troops, it was not as simple as benefits. Richer than the humans? TSK. Compared to the dwarves, who were all mining experts, the humans were no match. Who knew how many magical metal mines the dwarves had hidden? The 7 dwarf kingdoms were all located in the westernmost part of the legendary continent. They were connected and could support each other. They usually lived in the western continent and rarely appeared in the eastern, southern, and eastern regions. Even if there were dwarves, they were usually dwarf tribes left behind from the Second Era. They had little to do with the 7 dwarf kingdoms. William stroked his chin. He did not say that the dwarf kingdoms sent their troops. It seemed that he and Odom were the reason. The dwarves were afraid that after he helped the Red Fire Kingdom conquer the Desert Kingdom, he would help Odom return to the Lonely Mountain. In the western region, besides the Sunset Empire, there was only one human kingdom, as well as some grand duchies and small duchies. The rest of the land was divided among the 7 dwarf kingdoms. There was a large plain in the southwest corner that was uninhabited. Neither dwarves nor humans had set foot in that area, because there was a mountain in the westernmost part of that plain, Lonely Mountain, as the name suggested. On the grassland, with a radius of millions of square kilometers, there was only this lonely mountain facing the sea. It was rumored that this mountain towered into the clouds and was as large as a god's mountain. The lonely mountain was the former hometown of Odom with wavy blonde hair. After the collapse of the lonely mountain, the dwarf clan, Heavy Hammer, fled all the way to the southern region. Taking advantage of the fact that other dwarves did not dare to go deep into the Blackleaf Forest, they fled all the way to the east. That was how William and Odom met. Where's His Majesty? Let's meet him first. William did not think about it anymore. Things had changed too much. The war between the two human kingdoms had suddenly involved the dwarves and the City of Dawn. TSK. If he included the Serafkin and elves, even if he did not include the War of the Five Armies, he would have 4 races. William arrived at the palace. A total of 800,000 players were the vanguard. They had rushed here with William. At this moment, they were wandering around the palace, trying to find some small missions to complete. Even though there were many players, when facing the Desert Kingdom and the 3 Dwarf Kingdoms, they had no advantage at all. It was even more difficult than facing the Orc Empire. Not to mention that the Orc Empire had not gone all out. The changes in the past 5 years were too great. The effect of the second wave of magic revival was to improve the bloodline of all the NPCs in the God's world. They even leveled up and leveled up. This indirectly equalized the immortality of the players. Now, almost all the NPCs that the players could see were bosses. The attributes of the NPCs with bloodline were too much to bear. William met King Vikru again. Just like in his previous life, this talented king of the Red Fire Kingdom had made use of the magic revival to officially enter the legendary level. As a result, the Red Fire Kingdom had 2 legendary professionals. When Vikru saw William, he looked solemn. Previously, the City of Dawn was just a chess piece that he had high hopes for. He had the intention to nurture the reputation of the City of Dawn in terms of employment. But the City of Dawn had used this as a stepping stone. It had grown to a neutral camp that was not weaker than the Red Fire Kingdom. Even the fate of the Red Fire Kingdom was in the hands of the City of Dawn. It was just like how he had choked on food. In the end, all the doctors were on leave. Only a young nurse named William could save him. He was worried. Lord of Dawn, you're here. Vikru did not treat William like a child like before. He spoke in a very formal manner. Greetings, Your Majesty. William patted his chest with his right hand and bowed slightly. Their statuses were similar, but William would never forget the etiquette of a legendary expert. Vikru sat on the throne and nodded. He frowned slightly and said in a low voice, I heard that you've only brought an 800,000 Death Legion with you. That's not enough. At least it's enough for now. I don't know what scale of war you want to fight, Your Majesty. William sat on the throne and calmly replied. Vikru did not stop when he heard this. He narrowed his eyes and said, It's a war of annihilation. I want to conquer all the territories of the Desert Kingdom. Good. If that's the case, as long as Your Majesty has enough bargaining chips, I'll bring the regular Dawn Legion. Of course I know about the Dawn Legion. Are they 200,000 veterans who fought in the extreme north for 5 years? Vikru's eyes lit up. Ever since the City of Dawn had participated in the war against the Orc Empire, the surviving veterans were basically butchers on the battlefield. After all, he knew that the City of Dawn had performed outstandingly in the extreme north. At least 2 million orcs had died at the hands of the City of Dawn. Especially, Prince William, do you intend to let the legendary Dragon Blood Legion fight? Vikru clenched his fists. The reason why no one dared to look down on the current Dawn City was because of the Dragon Blood Legion that hadn't suffered any casualties. Life chain. It was hard for the other factions to imagine that the elves had given this secret technique to the City of Dawn. If the Dragon Blood Legion appeared on the battlefield, the Red Fire Kingdom would definitely win. William raised his eyebrows and said, The war has just begun. The Dragon Blood Legion will not be mobilized. Your Majesty should know what will happen in a month, right? It's just a darkness invasion. They won't appear at the borders of the kingdom. Vikru shook his head nonchalantly. Even so, does Your Majesty think that I'll let the Dragon Blood Legion appear on the battlefield against the humans and dwarves? William smiled. If such a trump card legion appeared on the battlefield against the dark creatures and orcs, others would have nothing to say. They might even say that William was the hero of the gods' continent. But if the Dragon Blood Legion targeted the humans, dwarves, and elves, it would definitely attract criticism. From the overall situation, this was a civil war between the Light faction. At least before the endless chaotic war, there would be many uncertain factors if the trump card legion was mobilized. It would more or less lower the reputation of the Light faction. Vikru sighed and said, "How many of those veterans can come? Actually, Your Majesty, you don't have to worry about the legion that I'll send. I just need to complete the mission that you've given me." William did not agree directly. The combat power of the veterans was very strong, but the dwarves and the warriors of the Desert Kingdom were also very strong. Any injury or death would be a great loss. It would be better to let the players die to settle the problem. Vicar did not say anything else. William was acting like a businessman. He would send out the legion according to the amount of money that he was paid. While the two of them were discussing, in the City of Dawn, Odom Heavyhammer suddenly looked to the west. He had heard that William had led a group of chosen ones to reinforce the Red Fire Kingdom. It seemed that the Dwarf Kingdom had joined the war. He slowly walked to the blacksmith workshop. When some dwarf blacksmiths saw him and noticed that William had a serious expression, they made way for him to enter his blacksmith workshop. He pushed open the door. There was a row of equipment that he had forged for himself on the counter. Odom looked at his noble attire and took it off, revealing his strong muscles. He touched the armor and weapons that he had not worn for many years and slowly put them on. Subsequently, Odom Heavyhammer walked out of the blacksmith workshop. He looked at his clansmen and suddenly said, "I want to go to the Red Fire Kingdom. Your Highness, now is not the time," a dwarf with white hair and a white beard said. He had a high-nosed bridge. "Yes, the City of Dawn is not strong enough to deal with those traitors. They can't protect us in the Lonely Mountain." Odom shook his head. "I don't want to return to the Lonely Mountain now. It's just that those damned traitors have appeared on the battlefield. I can't help but want to kill them. We are willing to follow your Highness. We are willing to follow your Highness." In a pitch-black underground space, an underground river flowed, and magic lamps hung around. The dwarves of the Lonely Mountain knelt on one knee. Their gazes were filled with fervor as they looked at their king. Odom looked at his clansmen in front of him. They had their own houses in the City of Dawn and had enough money. They could have lived an easy life. But the Lord of the City of Dawn had promised to bring them back to the Lonely Mountain. They thought that it was just a casual promise to deceive a group of poor homeless people. But their hopes grew, and William's promise to the others was fulfilled. This was why they would rather live in the underground blacksmith workshop than go out. Because they wanted to go home. Odom closed his eyes and took a deep breath. "You stay here. I'll go alone. I want to tell those traitors that the bloodline of the Lonely Mountain is not extinct. The Heavyhammer clan will return to the Lonely Mountain." The other dwarves slowly stood up and looked at Odom, who passed by them. The Lonely Mountain song that had not appeared for hundreds of years sounded again, loud and clear. Impassioned. This was a song that was born out of despair. This was a song that a dwarf composer had created while fighting against the Balrog army. This was the name of the song. Hometown. The Lonely Mountain was their home. Once, this was a battle song to defend their hometown. Now, this was the battle drum to return to their hometown. Chapter 485. William and King Vikru had just finished discussing the employment price when they sensed Odom's aura. Both of them were epic professionals. When Odom walked out of the teleportation portal, even though he was far away, William could sense him easily. William discovered that Odom was not too impulsive. Since he had found Diablo and his companions, he was no longer worried. William had more things to discuss, so he did not have the time to counsel the dwarf. The border between the Red Fire Kingdom and the Desert Kingdom is either a desert or a plain. There aren't many mountains, rivers, and lakes. It's hard to find any landmarks. It's a flat plain. Vikru pointed at the map. The border was filled with plains and deserts. Because of this, both sides had many conflicts over the ownership of the border. Over the past hundreds of years, more than 100,000 scouts had died at the border. Even now, there are still various battles. Both sides had built 7 military fortresses at the border. But the military fortresses were not very useful. At most, they were used to hide soldiers and prevent large-scale enemy attacks. But the cavalrymen of both sides could easily bypass the war fortresses. They relied on the mobility of the cavalrymen to plunder the resources and towns behind the enemy's rear. As long as it was not a large city or a military fortress, it would be difficult to defend against the attacks of the top professionals. The battle line is too long. Both sides will have fatal weaknesses. If we're not careful, we'll be ambushed by the enemy. We'll suffer heavy losses. William frowned. Things are different now. In the past, the Desert Kingdom did not have so many soldiers. Although the Desert Kingdom's cavalry was famous, there were not many of them. At most, there were only 60,000 of them, which was equivalent to 20 cavalry legions. But now, with the addition of the Dwarf Kingdom, the enemy's cavalry had increased in number. In terms of mobility, the enemy's cavalry was much stronger than the players. It could be said that, if the enemy only used the cavalry legions, the 800,000 players would be cut down like wheat. They would not be able to withstand the attack. Magical beast cavalrymen, regardless of whether they were magical beast warhorses or magical beast mountain goats, all of them possessed powerful charging and defensive capabilities. They were not warhorses and cavalrymen in the real world. They could not be compared. It was too easy for the magical beast cavalry to charge at the enemy's formation. Regardless of whether the enemy had shields, soldiers, or spearmen, they would be killed in a wave of attacks. It's just that the battle line is too long, and I'll go from being on the offensive to being on the passive side. Unless my army surpasses theirs in both quantity and quality. That way, they will be in a passive state and will be afraid of our attacks. Vikru's meaning was clear. The Dawn army had to come, not just the players. He had just received the news that less than 50,000 high-level professionals had come from the Chosen One army, and the remaining 750,000 were all mid-level professionals. Such a scale was nothing in a war between kingdoms. This was because ever since the Second Magic Revival, Advanced and Grandmasters were the main forces on the battlefield. William raised his eyebrows and said in a deep voice, "Sure, I'll add 50,000 regular soldiers of the Dawn Army. All of them are advanced veterans who have fought in the extreme north." Both sides were in the process of talking. A royal guard hurriedly entered the hall and shouted, "Emergency! The Iron Fist King's dwarf cavalry has arrived at the border. They seem to be looking for a place to set up camp." Subsequently, another royal guard entered the hall and knelt on one knee. He said, "Emergency! The 20,000 dwarf cavalry of the Harbeard Kingdom has arrived at the border." They did not stop there. Instead, they killed their way to the border. There are only 2 legions of cavalry at the nearest military fortress. There are less than 6,000 of them. They are unable to intercept them. Then, the third royal guard rushed in and said nervously, "The Desert Kingdom has sent 500,000 soldiers. They have arrived at the 7 fortresses. Among them, 23 epic professionals have come to challenge us." General Fence could not take it anymore and left the city to fight. However, the enemy's titled epic expert, the Bloody Hand Butcher, Gugas, was killed on the spot. What? Vikru slammed the table and stood up in anger. The war had not started, and they had lost an epic professional. He suppressed his anger and said in a deep voice, "Inform the generals guarding the fortresses. No matter how much they challenge us, they are not allowed to leave." "Yes, your majesty." After the 3 guards left, Vikru looked at William and said in a deep voice, "The Desert Kingdom has a total of 30 epic professionals, but they have sent 23 of them. They are exerting pressure on us." "How many epic professionals are there in the Red Fire Kingdom?" William asked curiously. 21. Now, there are only 20 left. Vikru frowned. The Red Fire Kingdom did not have an advantage in terms of the number of epic professionals. However, they had one more legendary professional than the Desert Kingdom. This was the source of the Red Fire Kingdom's confidence. Originally, this was also his greatest advantage. But ever since the Desert Kingdom made such a move, he knew that the enemy must have found a legendary professional to restrain him and his grandfather. This legendary professional was most likely a dwarf. The situation was obvious. Originally, the Red Fire Kingdom had the advantage in a number of legendary professionals. It was their greatest advantage. But now, the Red Fire Kingdom had no advantage. They were at a disadvantage in terms of the number of legendary professionals and the quality of their soldiers. But William did not show any expression. It was better to be at a disadvantage. He would rather have a few more epic professionals die. Otherwise, how could the value of the City of Dawn be displayed? He wanted to tell the world. Who hired the City of Dawn? No matter who the enemy was, he would turn the tables on them. Did they want to win? As long as they had enough money, everything was not a problem. William glanced at Vikru and said, "If the City of Dawn helps you restrain 10 epic professionals, what can you do?" Including the dwarf who just arrived, the City of Dawn only has 4 epic professionals, right? Vikru was referring to Diablo, Violent Dragon, Odom, and himself. Of course, the City of Dawn had more than 4 epic professionals. William said, "The 3 of them will restrain one. Leave the remaining 6 to me." The enemy has an epic rank title. How do you think Gugas, the bloody-handed man, got an epic rank title? He has killed 6 of our country's epic ranked experts. I should have killed this brat who has only reached the epic rank stage a few years ago. Vikru was furious. Fortunately, his nephew, Brian, was not bad. He had killed 4 epic professionals in the past few years and was about to become a titled epic expert. William laughed lightly. He's just a loser. What bloody-handed Gugas? During the magic conference, I tore both my arms apart. I don't know how he healed them. Vikru did not know that William and Brian had a grudge. Although William had not killed an epic human, Lich Cannel was not considered a human. He had obtained the title of Thunderblade during the epic title conference. Then, he had killed 8 epic orcs in the extreme north. His combat power should be quite good. He hesitated for a while and said, "If the City of Dawn can restrain 10 epic professionals, I will dare to attack the fortress. But the dwarves, leave the dwarves to me." William raised his eyebrows and said, "I don't think they will participate in the defense of the fortress. I will let my chosen ones and regular soldiers restrain them so that they can't easily enter the fortress and wreak havoc." "That's good." Vikru nodded. Subsequently, William did not stay here any longer. A large number of soldiers of the Red Fire Kingdom started to move to the 7 fortresses at the border. The players of the City of Dawn rushed to the border excitedly. When they found out that their opponents were dwarves, they were overjoyed. According to the players' thinking, they were just a bunch of dwarves who only knew how to forge. What is so great about them? They could just knock them out with a single punch. But when the players arrived at the front line and set up camp, they discovered a problem when they looked at the dwarf warriors. The equipment of these dwarves was awesome. Chanli Joga's eyes were blinded. He could not help but be stunned. Gosh. Do you see that? They're all black gold armor. I see it. Shut up. Chu Yochio was a little uneasy. Their 200,000 player army and a few regular soldiers of the City of Dawn who had just arrived were responsible for the dwarf army of the Iron Fist Kingdom. But when they used their insight from afar, they saw that the equipment of the dwarf scouts were all dark gold equipment. Gosh, everyone was an advanced. Why were they so awesome? There was no reason. It was because they were dwarves. Mastering iron was their talent and instinct. The intermediate professionals of the Dwarf Kingdom had gold equipment. Wasn't it normal for the professionals of the advanced and above to have dark gold equipment? As long as they had enough resources, they could even obtain legendary equipment. Did they have to be like the human empires, where the more powerful regular soldiers only had dark gold equipment? What a joke. Our Dwarf Kingdom is rich, is willful, and our equipment is awesome. But the dwarves could show off to the legions of the human kingdoms and empires. But they could not show off to the players, because their equipment was too good. The 800,000 players, who were split into 3 battlefields, were all green with envy. According to their thinking, it did not matter how difficult the battle was. It did not matter how many times they had to die. If they killed a dwarf, it would be a great gain. But the equipment did not fit well. But if they obtained 2 pieces of equipment and found a blacksmith to modify them, they would be able to get a piece of dark gold equipment. That would be a great gain. And William had the same idea. He wanted the players to be fearless in the face of death. If the rewards and experience were not enough, he would find a group of enemies with rich gold. Were the dark creatures the same as the dwarf army? It was the difference between a vagrant army and a rich second-generation army. What was more important was William did not believe that the three dwarf kingdoms intended to sacrifice the 100,000 dwarves. It was enough to restrain them. Both sides would not engage in a life-and-death battle. The dwarves had charged a few times and found that the effect was not great. They would choose to defend instead of taking the initiative to attack. They would lose their lives to the invincible chosen ones. After all, the Red Fire Kingdom and the Desert Kingdom would be in charge of the main battlefield. The City of Dawn and the Dwarf Kingdom would be supporting the dwarves from the side. Chapter 486. Spring had arrived, and all creatures were revived. It was the mating season again. On the vast plains, besides the 14 fortresses of the two nations, there were sounds of hearty breathing. But these animals and magical beasts did not have sex for long. Not only were they chased away by the tens of thousands of players, but they could only look at them with resentment. This group of players had started to set up camps on both sides of the fortresses and occupied their nests. It was an unforgivable sin. Stop. The three dwarf nations will send 300,000 soldiers. They will attack the Red Fire Kingdom from both sides of the fortresses. Mission difficulty S. Mission objective: stop the Dwarf Kingdom's army from penetrating 30 kilometers into the border. Mission reward? Mission reward? When the players saw this mission, they felt that it was not too bad. It was just an S-level mission, so the difficulty should not be too high. After all, they had participated in an SSS-level mission. Even though they had not experienced the war in the last 5 years, they felt that the difference was not too big. The only difference was that the equipment of the dwarfs was too good. It made them timid and impulsive. It was like a normal person seeing a naked beauty standing in front of him. But she was the world champion of the freestyle combat. You wanted to go up against her, but you did not dare to. At this moment, players were setting up tents in groups of 3 to 5. Soon, all kinds of tents covered the ground. William did not directly go to the military fortresses because it was not easy to start a war. If a war broke out, regardless of victory or defeat, they had to calculate the outcome. Both sides were making preparations. Therefore, he was with this group of players. He glanced at the colorful tents of the players. They looked like pleasure boats on the Qinhuai River. Outsiders who didn't know would think that they weren't here to fight, but to sell their wares. But there was nothing to sell in the gods' market. Among them, the skin of the tents was an option. So were the skins of various weapons. As a result, even though the quality of the weapons and equipment of the players was not good, they all had the style of Frostmourne. 2 words: dazzling. Even the NPCs wanted to snatch it. Come to think of it, many players had died tragically under the blades of the NPCs because their weapons and skins were too cool. Not only did the players want to loot their equipment, but the NPCs also wanted to loot their equipment. William walked in the military camp. Many players gathered around him in an attempt to loot 1 or 2 missions. They hoped that he would randomly give them a strange encounter mission. William did not have the time to give them strange encounter missions. He just laughed and chatted with them for a while. He was not as cold and arrogant as before. All of a sudden, the players had a good impression of him. They felt that he was easy to get, but the missions were getting more difficult. After all, even Chongli Jiuge, the hope of the entire village, had never asked William for a mission, because His Royal Highness wasn't thinking about anyone else but Odom, who was also in the same situation. He quickly found the blonde, wavy Odom. He was wearing armor and holding a warhammer. He looked like he was going to turn the world upside down. When the latter saw him, he didn't make a sound. He just sat on the chair and seemed to be waiting for the Dwarf Legion to attack. William looked at the stubborn dwarf and suddenly said, "Bear with it. Now is not the time to really start a full-scale war with the Dwarf Kingdom. Besides, these dwarves used to be your people. Do you really have the heart to kill them? Especially when you, an epic-rank professional, went on a killing spree. What's going on?" Odom snorted coldly. They used to kill my people like this. So what if they're epic ranked? Even a legendary has attacked. You have to think for the sake of the City of Dawn. You're the deputy city lord of the City of Dawn. If you dare to attack their ordinary troops, their epic professionals will attack the Dawn army. It's a win-win situation. William sighed. When Odom heard this, he wrinkled his nose and cursed under his breath. Then he said, "Then what do you think we should do? Think about it. You have the bloodline of Lonely Mountain. The high officials of the Dwarf Kingdom know it, but the ordinary people don't. What you should do now is to let them know that you're the last heir of the Dwarf Emperor. You also need to win their favor and get the support of some dwarves." Odom rubbed his long blonde hair and said in bewilderment, "That's impossible. After so many years, this group of dwarves, including the dwarven warriors in the army, have basically been brainwashed countless times. Perhaps they still remembered Lonely Mountain. That mountain was right there in front of them. But they must have thought that the bloodline of Lonely Mountain has long been lost. Even if I go out, I won't be recognized." William narrowed his eyes and said with a serious expression, "You can't say that. There should be many people who remember that you have the bloodline of Lonely Mountain. Even in the 7 major dwarf kingdoms, not everyone wants you to die. Otherwise, with the strength of the dwarf kingdom, do you think that you can escape for hundreds of years without being wiped out?" Odom thought about it. Indeed, in the past hundreds of years, there had been many disasters, and there had always been people secretly tipping them off. But as time dragged on, those connections were lost. He did not know whether those people no longer remember the kindness, or did they think that the bloodline of Lonely Mountain could no longer rise again. But it was undeniable. The bloodline of Lonely Mountain would definitely be recognized by others. Even legendary professionals would stand on his side. William said again, "If I have the bloodline of Lonely Mountain, it will be very easy to get their recognition. After all, you know that my looks are unparalleled in the world." Odom was deep in thought. William continued, "Ahem, since you are not as good-looking as me, and you still want to return to Lonely Mountain and even want to become the king of the dwarfs, you need some means to make them recognize you as a person first, and then your identity." "What means?" Odom's eyes lit up. Could it be that His Royal Highness had already prepared a way for him to return to Lonely Mountain? William laughed and said, "Of course. Do you know about the darkness invasion in a month's time?" "Yes." Odom nodded. William glanced at his height and helped him stand on a chair. Then he whispered in Odom's ear, "I have a way to make the darkness invasion appear on this battlefield and let the dark creatures launch a destructive attack on the dwarf army. And you will be their savior." Odom frowned. Even if the humans and the dwarfs started a war and the darkness invasion suddenly attacked one side, they would help each other. Of course, it was possible. In fact, most of the time, they would sit back and watch, allowing the dwarfs to suffer countless casualties. So in this way, if Odom really saved a certain dwarf army, he would gain a lot of good impression points. But William did not finish his sentence. He continued, "If you want to bring thousands of your people back to Lonely Mountain, it will be very difficult. Unless this war is over and I have a foundation here, then I can send an army to accompany your clan to Lonely Mountain. But now you can't help it. Then you can only rely on acting pitifully. But then again, the possibility of success is higher." "What do you mean?" Odom still did not understand. William laughed and said, "Of course, it's an arrangement." After that, His Royal Highness explained his plan in detail. Odom was dumbfounded and shocked. What plan? That was to let the bards release a piece of news. The deputy lord of the City of Dawn, Odom Heavyhammer, was the last bloodline of the Lonely Mountain Empire. He would lead a returning team of only a dozen people to the Lonely Mountain. He would try to open the door that had been sealed for hundreds of years and retrieve the artifact of the dwarfs. He was the owner of the artifact. Not only would he rule the Lonely Mountain, but he would also become the king of all the dwarfs. As for the purpose, of course, it was to unite the dwarfs to fight against the future darkness invasion. Anyway, it was said in a righteous way. This so-called divine artifact was naturally something he had made up. But the dwarfs had the wooden artifact. No one could say for sure whether there was an artifact hidden in the Lonely Mountain. Even the Dwarf Kingdom could not guarantee that Odom would not obtain such an artifact after entering the Lonely Mountain. Therefore, the dwarf kingdom that had the intention to target Odom would definitely send people to obstruct him and cause him many difficulties. The dwarven forces that supported Odom would also slowly surface. After all, Odom was very strong. Now, not only was he an epic professional, but he was also the deputy lord of the City of Dawn. More importantly, only his bloodline could break the barrier of the Lonely Mountain and open the door. This was his capital, and William wanted to spread this news to the entire continent. Then, countless people would be looking at him. Therefore, when that time came, the 7 dwarfs had been fighting in the Lonely Mountain for many years, but they had not opened the door. What was wrong with him? A dwarf who was stranded in a foreign land, trying to open the door. Even if they did not recognize his identity, they could at least try, right? Therefore, even if some dwarf kingdoms wanted to attack, they could not send dwarfs because there were too many people. They could only hire some assassins. As for how to make the darkness invasion appear on this battlefield, of course, they had to find Daniel and ask him to send some dark creatures to sneak attack the dwarf legion. That was right. Daniel did not die. He had successfully entered the Sage State and become a big boss in the Dark World. In addition to his achievements, many legendary devils had been attracted to join his forces. At this time, Daniel and the 72 devil gods had joined forces and were engaged in a war with the great Devil King Burial. After the appearance of these dark creatures, the quantity and quality of the dark creatures surpassed the dwarf legion, bringing despair to the dwarfs. Then, Odom appeared and led his small team to save the dwarf warriors. It did not matter whether these guys appreciated his help or not. After saving the people, they left. Of course, Odom had to pretend that he did not have hatred for these people, because Odom wanted to become the emperor of the dwarfs. It was not enough to just open the Lonely Mountain and obtain the fake artifact. He had to slowly grind it over time. He also had to show his charisma as a leader and his boldness as an emperor. He also had to indirectly express that even if someone had betrayed the royal family of the Lonely Mountain, even if someone had sent assassins to hunt them for hundreds of years, he would also forgive and never bear a grudge. He just wanted to lead the dwarfs back to the glory of the Lonely Mountain. Gradually, as long as he could open the gate of the Lonely Mountain. Naturally, many dwarfs would be attracted to him. At least those dwarfs who had helped him would definitely give him support. In this way, Odom could establish a foothold in the Lonely Mountain. Perhaps only tens of thousands of dwarfs would come, and they could only build a small city. But as long as he kept an eye on them, and let the other dwarf kingdoms feel that Odom did not have those vengeful thoughts, then he would use all kinds of conspiracies to slowly annex the other dwarf kingdoms. This method was obviously different from what Odom had imagined. According to his idea, he wanted to use the military power of the City of Dawn to kill all the dwarf kingdoms that had hunted him. Revenge was the most important thing. But in this way, the City of Dawn still needed too much time. Even if they could win, their vitality would be greatly damaged. And Odom and the other dwarfs had a blood feud. He could not become the master of the Lonely Mountain in this life. This was not what William wanted to see. When William left, he patted Odom's shoulder. If you want to return to the Lonely Mountain, then forget your hatred. It's not too late to take revenge in 10 or 100 years. When you control the 7 major dwarf kingdoms, do you have to worry about not being able to take revenge? Odom's eyes were confused. He did not pay attention to William's words, because he saw a list. His team list: Battle Wizard McLean, epic. Light Warrior Lancelot, epic. Wind Ranger Legolas, epic. Dual Spacetime Akarov, epic. Dual Waterfire Cassidon, epic. Fire Warrior Roderick, epic. There were many other epic professionals. There were epic professionals from the 4 regions of the North, South, and East. There were people from the empires, the kingdoms, the neutral camps, the Temple of Light, the Mercenary Guild, and the Palace of Darkness. These people were his superficial brothers that he had built up over the years. In one sentence, build up momentum. William wanted to build up momentum from all aspects. He wanted the Dwarf Kingdom to understand that the team that accompanied Odom represented a lot of power. He was now going to build a team that was more powerful than the Hobbit trilogy and the Fellowship of the Ring. He went straight to the Lonely Mountain. He was not worried about what would happen if Odin became the Dwarf King or how he would get along with him in the future. These were all things in the future. He even hoped that Odin could split up and establish a bigger force on his own. This would bring greater benefits to the City of Dawn if Odin really established himself in the Lonely Mountain. Not to mention that he could rule all the dwarf kingdoms again. Even if it was just a small portion, it would be enough. Because in this way, the City of Dawn would have a king-level force as an ally, both openly and secretly. This kind of ally was definitely a strong one. Before Odin died, there would be no problem. Furthermore, the future could be discussed in the future. By then, William might have become a sage, and he would not need the support of the Dwarf Kingdom. Even if he did not become a sage, did he not have the ability to increase the affinity of his nephew? In one sentence, build up a relationship with William. There was no possibility that the affinity would decrease. Increasing the affinity was the only way out. Chapter 487. Under William's persuasion, Odin returned to the City of Dawn and prepared to join forces with the Lonely Mountain team. This group of people would officially set off in 3 days. Along the way, they would not use teleportation portals. Instead, they would ride magical beast war horses to the Lonely Mountain. In other words, they would brazenly fight along the way. They would let the Dwarf Kingdom know that they could not stop Odin from returning to the Lonely Mountain. It was simple. I've given you a chance. If you can't stop us, you're the one who's useless. But Odin's departure made burned cinder rush over from the City of Dawn. After all, William had promised King Vikru that he wanted to resist the attack of 10 epic professionals. Suddenly, one epic professional was gone, so he needed another to join in. For the next 3 days, friction continued at the borders of both sides, but the large-scale war had not started. But the players were not anxious. Even if the war did not start, they still had various other activities, such as playing mahjong, fighting the landlord, and one-on-one duels. These were all normal activities. Anyway, they could get war experience and compensation every day, so it was not too much of a loss. But the war here seemed to have come to a standstill. But under William's various arrangements, his 80,000 to 90,000 traveling bards had begun to promote the same thing across the entire continent. The Blacklock Dwarf Kingdom was not close to the Desert Kingdom, and it did not participate in the war between the two human kingdoms. There were many small black cities in its territory, and most of them were inhabited by tens of thousands of dwarves. At this time, a half-elf bard who had come from afar walked into the city with tired steps, but his appearance still attracted the attention of many dwarves. Many dwarf children and young dwarves followed behind the bard and kept asking, Mister, we haven't had a bard here for 2 years. What story do you intend to tell? The half-elf smiled at him. I have many stories in my heart, but I have to eat my fill. As he spoke, his stomach growled. The other dwarves laughed. There was even a little guy who wanted to pat the bard's stomach, but the dwarves behind him carried him back. Isn't it easy to eat? Come to my tavern. I'll take care of all your food and drinks. A dwarf woman suddenly said in a muffled voice. She grabbed the arm of the half-elf and was about to take him away. The others could only follow. It was normal to treat a bard to a meal, drink, or stay in a hotel. In many small places, there were no such things as entertainment. Bards were like the people who went from village to village in the 90s and played movies. Their appearance often attracted the attention of the whole town. So, the tavern owner made a killing. After the half-elf bard came to the tavern, he couldn't help but eat heartily. In order to come here, he not only got lost, but also almost starved to death. Now was not the time to pretend. When the other dwarves saw his appearance, they also laughed. They felt that this half-elf looked very much like an aristocrat, and the distance between the two sides narrowed a lot. However, someone immediately shouted, Sir, quickly tell a story. If you choke to death after eating too much, we won't be able to hear a pa. A 1-6-meter-tall dwarf patted the child's head and couldn't help but laugh and scold. Whose kid is this? Take him away. I'll tell you now. Boss, give me a bottle of wine. I'm a little choked now. The bard patted his chest until he drank a big mouthful of wine. Then he smiled at the dwarves sitting in a circle. He asked, What story do you want to hear? What story do you have? Yes, tell us stories outside the Blacklock Kingdom. We've heard enough stories here. The half-elf bard thought for a moment and said, I have the story of the Lord of the City of Dawn, the story of the destruction of the Orc Empire in the far north, the story of the epic title competition, the Lord of the City of Dawn. I've heard of him. Why don't you listen to the story of the Orc Empire's destruction? Those damn orcs should have been wiped out long ago. But then again, that's the Orc Empire we're talking about. It's an empire protected by God. No, I have to listen to the Lord of the City of Dawn, the story of the epic title competition. They are all legendary experts. The bard looked at the noisy dwarves and suddenly laughed. Forget it. I'll tell you a new story, a story about the rise of a dwarf hero. What story? The hero of our dwarf race? No, the 7 great dwarf kingdoms rarely go out of the western region, and there are very few wars. You're not talking about the former dwarf hero, right? In that case, you don't have to say it. We've heard enough. The half-elf shook his head. This is not the story of the former dwarf hero. It happened in the last few days. Who is it? A group of dwarves asked with wide eyes. Odom Heavyhammer. The half-elf's tone became deep. When the other dwarves heard this name, they did not feel like they had heard it before. But many of the older dwarves' expressions suddenly changed, and they even looked at the bard nervously. The half-elf saw that they were all quiet, and he began to tell the story. A long time ago, the 7 great dwarf kingdoms were not kingdoms, but a dwarf empire. This dwarf empire was very powerful, and a legendary hero was enough to earn the admiration of elves and humans. And this dwarf empire was the Lonely Mountain Empire. It was like a human empire. The Blackleaf Elves, who were close to the Lonely Mountain Empire, had to pay tribute to the Lonely Mountain Empire every 10 years. But for some reason, the Lonely Mountain Empire was torn apart and eventually divided into 7 dwarf kingdoms. Many dwarves could not help but stare at the story. Did the dwarf kingdoms have such a history? Their little brains couldn't help but wonder why the 7 dwarf kingdoms didn't unite again and become the dwarf empire. Wouldn't that be comparable to the human empires? And they would not be bullied by the nearest sunset empire. The older dwarf kept swallowing. He thought of the Lonely Mountain and the surname of Heavyhammer. It had to be known. The average lifespan of an ordinary dwarf was a few hundred years, let alone a professional. So many dwarves in small towns and cities had experienced the division of the empire. The bard did not stop. He continued, It is said that the bloodline of the Lonely Mountain royal family has been severed, but no one expected that the last bloodline of the Lonely Mountain was chased by the orcs and bounty hunters all the way to the City of Dawn. And Odom Heavyhammer was also rescued by the legendary Lord of the City of Dawn. I want to hear the story of the Lord of the City of Dawn. It is said that he is the most handsome man in the legendary continent. I want to hear boo-hoo. An adult covered the mouth of a young dwarf boy to stop him from talking. The bard smiled. The little guy is right. The Lord of the City of Dawn has wandered around and done many earth-shattering things. Many people also say that he is the most handsome man in the legendary continent. But today our protagonist is not him. It is Odom Heavyhammer, the last bloodline of the Lonely Mountain. He led thousands of tribesmen to join the City of Dawn. For so many years, he endured humiliation and immersed himself in training every day just to show the glory of the Lonely Mountain Empire. Until 3 days ago, Odom Heavyhammer, who had become an epic professional, finally made up his mind to return to the Lonely Mountain. He reopened the door of the Lonely Mountain, which had not been opened for hundreds of years, and integrated all the dwarf kingdoms to rebuild the new Lonely Mountain Empire. An elderly dwarf suddenly asked, What do you mean? The door of the Lonely Mountain can only be opened by the bloodline of the Lonely Mountain? The bard nodded. That's right. The legendary door of the Lonely Mountain not only has the magic seal of the dwarf warlock sage, but also a variety of magic imprints that have been superimposed for tens of thousands of years. Only the bloodline of the Lonely Mountain can open it. Not only the door, but the entire Lonely Mountain is the same. The other dwarfs gasped. No wonder. The Lonely Mountain was there. It was said that there were countless treasures in the Lonely Mountain, but so far, no one had gone there. Of course, there were also many legends about the Lonely Mountain. For example, The reason that the Lonely Mountain was sealed was that there was a terrifying fire demon army inside. The bard continued, Odom Heavyhammer has the heart to return to the Lonely Mountain and intends to rebuild the Dwarf Empire. He has attracted the support and encouragement of many strong people. Do you know who is in his team? Hurry up and dig. We don't know anything. Yes, if you continue to talk nonsense, I will strip you naked and throw you into the pig pen. The half-elf's lips twitched with a fake smile. You bunch of dwarfs still want to fight? Okay, I'm only an intermediate professional. I will endure it. He took a deep breath and continued. Odom Heavyhammer's great goal is to attract the Son of Light, Lancelot, to join. The son of the City of Chaos, Akalu, joined. The apprentice of the Warlock Sage, the White Robe Knight, joined. Wait, why is the Warlock Sage called the White Robe Knight? The bard's face darkened. This is another event. Which one do you want to hear? Odom. In short, Odom formed a Lonely Mountain team, all of which are epic powerhouses. Those supporters come from different forces. It can be said that this team is made up of legendary characters. Each of them is enough to become a legendary character. But they only want to help Odom Heavyhammer fulfill his wish and join his Lonely Mountain team. Unfortunately, at this point, the bard could not help but sigh. But what? Hurry up and say it. Where's my sword? A dwarf warrior began to fumble. Ahem, wait. I just want to drink some wine. The half-elf laughed dryly and said, It's a pity that Odom Heavyhammer wants to return to the Lonely Mountain. Many people will definitely not want to see him. I don't know how many dangers he will encounter along the way. Have they encountered any difficulties now? Someone asked. The bard smiled. It has only been 3 days. They have not encountered any difficulties yet, but they will soon. I will inform you as soon as I receive the news. At the same time, this scene also appeared in the sphere of influence of many dwarf kingdoms. Of course, in other places on the legendary continent, many bards began to tell this story. Bards? So far, William had raised 80,000 people under his command. All day long, they told their own legendary stories in various places on the legendary continent, gaining waves of reputation. In the entire legendary continent, the reputation of the Lord of the City of Dawn among the people was excellent. Now, he used this method again to confirm Odom's identity as a bloodline of the Lonely Mountain. He also made the idea and goal of returning to the Lonely Mountain rise to the moral high ground. In short, he wanted to overturn the 7 major dwarf kingdoms without bloodshed. He wanted this team to become a true legend on the legendary continent. As for whether there would be other forces that did not want to see the reappearance of the Dwarf Empire and obstruct them, in fact, it did not matter much, because the human empires knew that even if Odom could return to the Lonely Mountain, he could not control all the dwarf kingdoms, and there might even be a civil war among the dwarves. They could not wait to see this scene. So even if there were obstructions, it did not matter. The more people there were, the more legendary it would be. When the time came, they would be overturned. He did not believe that this team, which gathered countless forces, would be afraid of anything. Chapter 488. 7 days later, the Red Fire Kingdom and the Desert Kingdom welcomed their first battle. The Desert Kingdom took the initiative to attack. 3 fortresses each sent 30,000 soldiers. A total of 90,000 soldiers advanced at the same time. The Red Fire Kingdom was not to be outdone. They sent the same number of soldiers from their fortresses. They intended to be the first to fight. In other words, both sides guarded the stone tablet at the border. You want to attack me? I want to attack you too. Since both sides were so confident, they would not rely on their fortresses. Let's fight first. The main purpose of this battle was to establish their morale so that the other side would not dare to act rashly. The epic experts of both sides would not attack. They only needed to guard and restrain the other side. On the walls of the Red Fire Kingdom's fortresses, the bloody-handed Guga's eyes were filled with hatred. He saw William Blackleaf. This was his nemesis who had humiliated him at the Magic Conference. D***Mn Lord of the City of Dawn. He dares to appear here. Hand him over to me. I'll tear him into pieces and grind his bones into ashes. Guga sneered. When he clenched his fists, ear-piercing sounds of metal colliding could be heard. Both of his arms had been crushed by William. If he did not have a treasure that could regrow his limbs, it would be extremely difficult for him to recover. But the Desert Kingdom and the Dwarf Kingdom had a good relationship. After his family paid a certain price, Gugas obtained a pair of magical metal arms. They were stronger and more powerful than his previous arms. He looked more like the bloody-handed butcher. Right Hanton, who was beside him, said in a deep voice, "The Lord of the City of Dawn is mine. I can only kill this D***********************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************ั*********************************************************************************************************************************** He even wanted to laugh in his heart. Why did Wright Hampton want to take revenge on William more than he did? It was because after the Magic Conference, William faced his first assassination attempt. It was by the assassins sent by the Hampton family. Wright Hampton's younger brother had also gone to Stormy Island. Unfortunately, they were unfortunate enough to bump into Moses, who was passing by during the assassination attempt. They did not even manage to touch William's finger before they were all killed. One move, they died on the spot. Hence, this deep hatred was hidden in the hearts of the Hampton family. Many members of the Hampton family thought that the Lord of the City of Dawn had deliberately exposed his weakness to trick them. As for why the bloody-handed butcher, Guggis wanted to laugh. Of course, it was because the Hampton family had hired killers to assassinate others. Wouldn't it be normal for them to be wiped out? But they still complained. He wondered if there was something wrong with this group of people. Did the Hampton family not think that the assassins they sent out would die? Oh, did it mean that William had to die and that they had to succeed? Furthermore, they had to snatch the hand of Thunder God. Guggis really couldn't agree with such a conceited family's way of thinking. Even though he also had a deep hatred for William, he only wanted to use his own abilities to take revenge. Even though they had William of William, they wanted to. It's just two epic title battle pet warriors. Hampton had dragon. Because of dragon, were legendary. Dragon. Hampton had said that he had become in kings. He had dragon. 2. William had dragon. William. He even took out 5 crystal balls and engraved the scene of him killing 5 epic rank professionals in other continents, making others admit that he was an honored epic ranked expert. Time. The Hampton family was part of the Desert Kingdom. It was good to have an epic warrior. Guggis muttered to himself, I'm afraid that you don't have the combat power of a titled warrior. If you get beaten up like a dog, not only will you embarrass the Hampton family, but you will also embarrass the Desert Kingdom. Guggis muttered to himself, I'm afraid that you don't have the combat power of a titled warrior. If you get beaten up like a dog, not only will you embarrass the Hampton family, but you will also embarrass the Desert Kingdom. It was almost noon. The horn sounded. The 90,000 soldiers of the Desert Kingdom were divided into 3 camps. They started their first wave of attack. William stood on the fortress wall and gazed into the distance. Smoke and dust billowed, and flames filled the sky. The 90,000 soldiers of the Desert Kingdom were all advanced professionals. They wore golden armor and had high combat power. They unsheathed their weapons and roared. The wind and clouds moved. It was as if a golden wave was about to engulf them. Some of the generals on the fortress wall of the Red Fire Kingdom could not help but stare at them. Brian, who was standing beside William, clenched his fists. The Desert Kingdom only has 200,000 soldiers, but they sent out 90,000 soldiers. That's almost half of their soldiers. They're really going to fight to the death with us. You have to know that there's no possibility of retreat. No matter which side loses, the entire army will be annihilated. Marquis, don't worry. The Red Fire Kingdom is not a pushover. Since we know that they have sent out the first echelon, the Desert Kingdom, we're not weaker than them. An epic professional wearing armor laughed. The dwarf army did not attack. Many players and live broadcasters ran over to watch from a close distance. It was as if they wanted to see who would emerge victorious in a head-on battle without relying on any favorable conditions. Angry Fatty was doing a live broadcast. When he saw the Desert Kingdom, he exclaimed in surprise, Gosh, 90,000 advanced professionals. There are 3 battlefields. Let's focus on the battlefield in the middle. Do you see that? Use your insight. They're all equipped with gold equipment sets. Their combat power is not weak. Gosh, they're very strong. Most of the legions in the City of Dawn are equipped with gold equipment sets, but their weapons are better. They're all dark gold. I'm looking forward to the appearance of the Dragonblood Legion. They're all equipped with dark gold equipment sets and epic weapons. Will they be able to defeat the Dragonblood Legion? The Red Fire Kingdom's Legion is attacking. A player suddenly shouted. Fatty immediately turned the camera to look. Countless players who were watching the live broadcast in the game could not help but exclaim in surprise. So cool. Gosh, what's the name of the Red Fire Kingdom's Legion? They're fully equipped. It was the first echelon legion of the Red Fire Kingdom, the Inferno Legion. The 90,000 soldiers were all equipped with fiery red armor. Even their swords were the same. What was more terrifying was that they were wearing blood-red masks. They looked like Balrogs that had crawled out of magma. But that was not the most important thing. Among the 90,000 soldiers, half of them were fire element professionals. When the professionals of a legion were made up of a certain attribute, it would form a legion buff. Hence, when the horn of the Inferno Legion was blown, fiery red battle energy shields formed on the surface of the soldiers' bodies. When all the soldiers had their battle energy shields, the Inferno Legion was like a huge burning blade. It charged at the Sandstorm Legion at an exaggerated speed. It was about to slash the Sandstorm Legion in half. The legions on both sides did not stop. The moment the horn was blown, they launched an all-out attack. Advanced professionals were like live targets when they flew in the air. But their running speed was very fast, and their stamina was very strong. The distance between both sides was less than 3,000 meters. As the distance between them continued to decrease, they continued to decrease. When the distance between them was less than 200 meters, all the soldiers of the Sandstorm Legion shouted at the same time. A 1,000-meter-long spear formed above the Legion and pierced towards the Inferno Legion. However, a crimson long saber appeared. It was accompanied by the power to split the heavens and earth. The saber slashed down. The sound of air explosions rang out continuously. The space started to distort. It was unknown whether the speed was too fast or the saber radiance was too hot. Boom! It was a clash of the combined skills of the legions. The sky changed color. The sea of clouds was blown away by the shock waves. It was just a single blow. Many soldiers from both legions fell to the ground silently. They were knocked unconscious by the shock waves from the collision of the body fusion technique. Some of them were even killed by the shock waves. Many Grandmaster professionals who were hired by the two nations felt a chill in their hearts. They knew that they would not be able to withstand the body fusion technique. They could even sense it. When the army fusion technique was used, the red saber and long spear in the sky had already locked onto them. They could not even escape. This was the power of a regular army. So fierce. I'm wet from watching. Why didn't I see such a powerful legion in the Orc Empire? That's right. We have been fighting in the extreme north for half a year, but we have never seen such a powerful legion in the Orc Empire. Even the Elves and the Frost Empire do not have such a powerful legion. Why not? The Dragonblood Legion, Glory Legion, and Blade Cavalry Legion in the City of Dawn all have the army fusion technique. Someone's mouth twitched. They finally understood. The war in the extreme north was purely a large-scale battle to train the soldiers. They had also heard that the icebound sword sage of the Orc Empire had left the extreme north with 8 million orcs. Perhaps the truly powerful legion and trump cards were hidden among the 8 million orcs. The reason why the City of Dawn was so powerful was because the City of Dawn only had these capable legions at that time. The players were discussing in the live broadcast channel. The legions from both sides had started to fight head-on. The shield warriors had also started to fight. Or rather, in such a head-on battle between legions, shield bearers were definitely the ones who died the most miserably. When the distance between both sides was 100 meters, the shield warriors from both sides started to charge at high speed. They did not hold back at all. A real man should use his full strength to charge at another man. The audience watched as the shield warriors from both sides collided with each other like two city walls. In the next second, the shield warriors from both sides retreated rapidly. At least half of them fell to the ground and could not stand up again. Those who could stand up had more or less fractured left arms. But no matter how tragic the battle was, no one would take a step back. The shield in the hand of a young shield warrior from the Flame Legion was knocked away. The bones in his arm were also pierced through the flesh and exposed in the air. But the young warrior gritted his teeth and pulled out his crimson saber. Once again, he charged at an enemy who had just climbed up. The saber slanted from low to high. The moment the red saber flashed, a head flew up. The young warrior did not stop. Before the head fell to the ground, he leaped over the corpse and the head. He jumped up and slashed with his saber. Crack! It hit the enemy's shoulder. The latter's teeth were bloody. He held the saber in his left hand and did not let go. He pulled out his saber and stabbed it into the young warrior's chest. But the young warrior was still breathing. He did not care about his life anymore. He pressed his hands on the hilt of the saber and slashed hard. Swoosh! Blood splattered into the air. The two of them stopped moving. They were already dead, this scene. It was all over the battlefield. Since the two legions could become the first confrontation between the two countries, then no one was weak. This war, they could only win. They did not lose. At this moment, all the warriors on the battlefield were holding their breaths. That was kill, kill, kill. Not only for meritorious deeds, not only for the nobles, not only for their families. As the top legions of the two countries, what they had to do now was for the hundreds of thousands of compatriots who had died tragically at the border for hundreds of years. They had to fight for them. Even if they died, they had to die standing. Chapter 489. When the warriors of the two countries had the strength of advanced professionals, catapults and heavy crossbows were rarely used, unless it was a siege. Because they were not very effective, they could only deal effective damage to an advanced warrior if they focused their fire. Therefore, in this situation, the only way to use large destructive weapons was to use cannons and magic cannons. However, neither country was in the mood to use such weapons. The Flame Legion and the Sandstorm Legion were at loggerheads. Bruce Inferno was a young, handsome nobleman and the commander of the Inferno Legion. At the same time, he was also a valiant warrior. He had just achieved a breakthrough in battle, from advanced to grandmaster. It was a big change, but no one gave him a chance to rest. Not only did he have to bear the pain of the breakthrough, but he also had to resist the pressure of the enemies. Because he had been at the front line, he was isolated and helpless after his breakthrough. His bodyguards were hundreds of meters behind him. At this moment, only ferocious-looking enemies surrounded him. A trace of sorrow rose in Bruce's heart. He had not even felt the power of a grandmaster. Was he going to die here? But even if he died, he had to take some of them with him. He seemed to have forgotten the pain of the breakthrough. He used all his remaining battle energy and cut down the enemies with his sword. No one could stop his sword energy. The enemies fell to the ground like wheat. However, he was facing the Sandstorm Legion, which was as famous as the Flame Legion. The soldiers in this legion were all valiant generals who did not fear death. Grandmasters were not epic warriors. Why couldn't he kill them? As time passed, the injuries on his body became more and more serious. Someone had cut open a wound on his chest. He forced his muscles to contract and suppress the blood that kept flowing out. But the next second, another spear pierced his abdomen. Bruce roared angrily and slashed out with his saber. The latter was split into two along with his spear, and blood splattered everywhere. However, the spearhead pierced his abdomen, making it more and more difficult for him to breathe. It was as if a candle was burning his internal organs. Swoosh! There was the sound of the sword cutting through the air. Bruce abruptly turned around and gripped the saber that was slashing at him with his left hand. His left arm sank slightly, but he ignored the blade that had cut into his bones and kicked out. Bang! The figure flew backwards, knocking down several enemies in succession. It was a pity. More enemies charged over, their weapons hitting his body from all directions. It only took him 30 seconds to become a Grandmaster. Bruce Blaze had fallen on this battlefield. Grandmaster professionals were strong, but they were not invincible in an army of advanced masters. There were many professions like him who broke through during battles, because battles between professions would give them a lot of experience. However, Most of the professionals who broke through during the battle could not survive more than 3 minutes before they were annihilated by the enemy. The formations of both sides were in chaos. When the shield warriors were all dead, the warriors were up. When the warriors were all dead, the rangers were up. A short hour of fighting. The battlefield at the border was already littered with corpses and rivers of blood. There were less than 30,000 soldiers still fighting, and they were fighting over the corpses of their enemies and comrades. Because they were using their lives to protect the borders of their country, not a single one of them took half a step back. The corpses were also gathered around the border. William stood on the fortress wall. His eye of thunder could cover the entire battlefield. He discovered that the advantage of the Inferno Legion was constantly increasing. If there were no accidents, the Red Fire Kingdom would win this war. However, William could see this scene, and so could the enemy. Perhaps the Desert Kingdom had already predicted that they would lose. Cavalry. They appeared. A total of 30,000 desert cavalry charged towards the battlefield like a sandstorm, leaving a trail of yellow sand in their wake. By the time everyone realized it, the cavalry was less than 8,000 meters away from the battlefield at the border. They were very fast, like a group of grim reapers charging out of the desert. This group of people was the strongest trump card of the Desert Kingdom. 80% of the troops were grandmasters, and this was only half of them. However, the 8,000 people in front of them were heavy cavalry clad in black armor, and their mounts were all desert lone wolves. They were a group of butchers known as the Desert Grim Reapers. They were the Wild Sand Cavalry. A general clenched his fist and roared, "These unruly desert barbarians! Where are the Red Fire Cavalry?" "Assembling," someone said in a deep voice. "What rules are there on the battlefield? We should have expected that the Desert Kingdom would not abide by the rules. But it's too late to assemble the Red Fire Cavalry." Brian sighed. Not only did the Desert Kingdom prepare their cavalry, but the Desert Kingdom should also be waiting at the gate of the fortress, ready to attack at any time. William raised his eyebrows and said, "It's not too late. If they don't abide by the rules, will you abide by them?" "What do you mean?" Brian frowned. William raised his eyebrows and said, "It's against the rules for them to use their Grandmaster legions to fight against your advanced legions. Are we epic warriors living off women? We're living off women. But that's not the point. The point is that they have too many epic professionals." Someone didn't dare to make a decision. Once the epic professionals attacked, the casualties would be much higher than the current situation. After all, there were not many soldiers left on the battlefield at the border. Even if the Inferno Legion could win, it would be a narrow victory. Even if 3,000 of them survived, it would be considered a high number. When the generals at the fortress saw the appearance of the Desert Cavalry, they had already decided to give up on the 3,000 soldiers. After all, the Desert Kingdom could not bear to see them lose. Hence, they treated the Desert Kingdom as if they were dead. They wanted to crush the Desert Kingdom and the Inferno Legion into corpses. William glanced at the Desert Kingdom. From a general perspective, it was not wrong to give up on the Desert Kingdom. But if they could not even protect their own soldiers, how could they create an invincible legion? William could not be bothered with them. Since these people did not believe in his strength, he could forget about it. But Brian suddenly grabbed his arm. He looked at the approaching Desert Kingdom cavalry and said in a deep voice, "How many epic experts can you stop? Are you going to kill me?" William asked. "Yes." "What a coincidence. I'm invincible in this realm." His Royal Highness grinned, revealing his big white teeth. The other epic experts looked at each other. They knew that the Lord of Dawn was a titled expert. He had killed 8 epic experts in the extreme north. But now, it seemed like he was bragging. But now, Marquis Brian had the right to decide the direction of the war. He immediately waved his hand and said, "Let the Red Flame Cavalry get ready to leave the city. As for the unruly cavalry," bang, William soared into the sky. Accompanied by the sounds of thunder, he charged at the front of the Desert Kingdom cavalry like lightning, stopping tens of thousands of soldiers alone. That was right. An epic professional had the ability to do so. After activating the domain, even if the Grandmaster Legion's aura could withstand the attacks, they would be worn down. William's appearance attracted the attention of an epic professional from the enemy's side. It was Right Hanton. He glared at William with hatred and roared, "Lord of the City of Dawn, how dare you be impudent in front of me? You've underestimated the Desert Kingdom. Get lost." An angry roar was heard, and shockwaves surged. Sand and dust filled the air as the roar swept towards Right Hanton and the tens of thousands of cavalry behind him. In the next second, lightning flashed and thunder roared. William had already grabbed Right Hanton's head, and he did not have time to react. A sonic barrier appeared under their feet. Right Hanton's body crashed into the Desert Kingdom cavalry in front of him. At that moment, a straight line of blood pierced through the Desert Kingdom cavalry. Wherever William passed, men and horses were thrown off their feet. Countless cavalrymen and horses were sent flying into the air. The Desert Kingdom cavalry in front of William was in a tragic state. Not even their flesh and bones were left. Right Hanton, who was in William's hands, only had a bloody hole on his face from William's fingers. His other injuries were not serious. Just as Right Hanton was about to resist, the other epic professionals came to help. William bent his back slightly, and the muscles on his left arm swelled. Then, he threw his arm as if he was throwing a shot put. Bang! Right Hanton was thrown out like a cannonball. He knocked away one of the epic professionals who came to help. At the same time, William arrived in front of Right Hanton and punched. Boom! Both of them crashed into the military fortress, causing the ground to tremble. William passed through thousands of soldiers and arrived in front of the military fortress. He faced all the epic professionals of the Desert Kingdom. He said it. He was now invincible in the epic realm. He was invincible. He was not afraid of the reincarnation of the Lord God. But there were only 20 epic professionals. They would be beaten up. Chapter 490. Right Hanton was an epic-titled warrior, but he was unable to retaliate against William. His reinforcements were also smashed into the fortress. The epic experts of the Desert Kingdom were shocked when they saw this scene. Fortunately, everyone reacted quickly. In the blink of an eye, 6 epic experts, including the bloody-handed Gugas, blocked William's path. Gugas was no longer as arrogant as before. He had no intention of tearing William apart. He had become stronger, while the Lord of the City of Dawn had become stronger. However, he could not back down. He shouted, "William, how dare you bully the weak? Aren't you afraid that I'll massacre your army? Humph, don't think that we don't know that you've secretly sent 50,000 veterans from the Battle of the Extreme North. If we kill them all, I don't believe that you won't feel heartache." A female enchanter sneered. William glanced at the enchanter, who was wearing a long purple robe. Her robe belonged to the magic sanctuary, but she was from the Desert Kingdom. The moment the enchanter saw her, she broke out in cold sweat. It was as if she was being stared at by a huge dragon. If she attacked, she would definitely be severely injured, even if not dead. William did not pay much attention to her. He just smiled and said, "Why? Are you the ones who set the rules? Using 30,000 Grandmaster cavalrymen to slaughter a few thousand advanced legions? Is this your rule?" Bang! Right Hanton, who had been smashed into the fortress wall, rushed out. His face was covered in blood, and he looked at William with resentment. He shouted angrily, "The Desert Kingdom doesn't need the City of Dawn to intervene. Remember, you're just a mercenary leader. Do you really think that you're the Blackleaf Prince? Even if you are, so what? You're just a group of sharp-eared people hiding in the forest." Right Hanton spoke so quickly that the group of people around him couldn't stop him even if they wanted to. Hence, they could only watch as the smiling William's expression gradually turned cold. William raised his eyebrows. He stepped in the air and walked towards Right Hanton. Right Hanton had been traumatized by William, but there were many experts around him. Of course, he would not retreat. He even arrogantly said, "The war between the two kingdoms is not something that mercenaries like you can afford to provoke. I heard that there's an old bastard in your family who's going to become a legend?" The prince suddenly asked, "You dare to scold my father?" Before his voice died away, William extended his hand again. In the blink of an eye, the epic-ranked experts in front of him attacked at the same time. Many people's auras kept spreading, and they were even about to activate their domains. However, it was fine if the prince did not make a move, but once he did, it would definitely be earth-shattering. Countless attacks came at him, but William completely ignored them. His left hand, which was covered in electric arcs, tore through the void, penetrated the countless attacks, and penetrated the yellow shield. Once again, he grabbed hold of Right Hampton, who was trying to retreat. Let go of me. I'm the heir of the Hampton family. My father is about to become a legendary. You damn crack. There was a crisp sound. The other people's attacks temporarily stopped. It wasn't just their attacks that prevented William from suffering serious injuries. It was also because Right Hampton, who had been flailing his arms and legs, had quietened down. After all, half of his head had caved in. Of course, he was not dead, but he had fainted from the pain. William used his 5 fingers to grab Wright's head. It was unknown if he had grabbed Wright's head. It was as if he was holding a dead dog. William turned his head to look at the people beside him. Is this the titled epic of the Desert Kingdom? Gugas did not say anything. He knew that something would happen to the fake titled epic, but he did not expect it to happen so quickly. However, it seemed like William did not know that it was the Hampton family who had sent the assassins to kill him. Otherwise, according to Guga's understanding of the Lord of the City of Dawn, William would not have held back. I advise you to let him go. Wright's father is the strongest person in the Desert Kingdom below the legendary level. He even has the experience of fighting with legendary level powerhouses. The female Archmage tried to persuade him again. She seemed to have good intentions, but her tone was provocative. If William had the guts, he would strangle Wright to death. Then, his father would come and kill William. William glanced at the woman and could not help but ask, "What's your mentor's name?" The woman smiled faintly and said fearlessly, "The 9th Elder of the Magic Sanctuary, Great Enchanter Irene." "Slut, you." The woman was shocked and furious. As an apprentice, she knew whether Irene was slut or not. After all, they were from the same sect. Like teacher, like disciple. Litsong Rolla was also a famous social butterfly in the Desert Kingdom. Professionals of the same level as her had explored her body. Even the bloody-handed butcher, Gugas, had visited her a few times. However, since this woman was a social butterfly, her greatest ability was not combat. Instead, she was seducing professionals of the same level and making them work for her. The bloody-handed butcher was her biggest target, but Gugas was an ambitious fighter. He could have sex with her, but he could not listen to her. Hence, Right Hampton became the best chess piece in her hands. Of course, the key was his lecherous old father, but even legendary professionals did not dare to speak ill of the 9th Elder of the Magic Sanctuary. If an epic professional dared to do so, it would be a huge taboo. The situation in the Desert Kingdom was getting chaotic. More and more epic professionals appeared in front of William. The situation was urgent, and it seemed like a big fight was about to break out. However, Burn Cinder, Diablo, Brian, and the others had also arrived behind him. When they passed by, they killed many desert cavalrymen. As a result, the formation of the Desert Kingdom was in disarray. In addition, the Crimson Flame cavalrymen had left the city. If they did not want to die, they could only retreat. In this situation, the battle between the epic professionals was about to begin. The other legions in the fortress could not act rashly. However, while everyone was confronting each other, in the west, a silhouette broke through the sea of clouds and flew over with a rumbling sound of air exploding. Before the person arrived, the voice arrived first. "Who dares to hurt my son? WQNMD." A trace of anger flashed across William's face. Damn it, when the younger one was beaten, the older one would come. Let them come. Who was afraid of who? He had been in the legendary continent for many years, but this was the first time he had encountered such a shameless family. If they did not kill his entire family, he would write his surname backwards. At the moment when William's killing intent surged, many epic professionals of the Desert Kingdom attacked at the same time. However, they knew that he could only watch helplessly as William crushed Right Hampton's head. "I want you dead." An angry roar came from the sky. A figure that was shining with golden light also attacked from a sea of clouds. William threw the corpse in his hand over. He unsheathed his thunder slash and swept away the enemy. The sword energy was too dazzling. The lightning sword energy that was hundreds of meters long swept across the heavens and the earth. It was like a blue rainbow hanging in the sky. Two epic professionals were unable to withstand this attack. Their bodies were covered in lightning as they were smashed into the city walls like cannonballs. Activate the domain. The bloody-handed slaughterer Gugas shouted angrily. Almost at the same time, all the epic professionals activated their respective domains. At that moment, countless bursting energy waves erupted from the bodies of the epic experts. The energy waves engulfed a radius of tens of thousands of meters. Everywhere they passed, there was no life. When the domain stabilized, within a radius of 10,000 meters, there was chaos. The sky was completely dark. The nearest fortress wall had collapsed by tens of meters. The air was filled with flames, thunder, wind blades, metal, sand, and dust. Time and space seemed to be distorted. This wave lasted for less than 3 seconds. Several epic professionals from both sides vomited blood. They hurriedly removed their domains and retreated from the battlefield. It could not be helped. There were too many domains. When so many domains were stacked together. Damn it, I can't take it anymore. This domain was comparable to the domain of a legendary professional. William was the one who attracted the most hatred. When he activated his domain, he triggered the Thunder buff of the Thunder Slash. Many of the professionals who had lightning on their bodies instantly suffered internal injuries. Their kidneys were exhausted. This was something that could be tolerated, but not the other way around. 7 experts from the Desert Sea attacked him at the same time. Cracks in the void appeared from the horizon. Golden spears rose from the ground. William encountered countless attacks in a short period of time, but he transformed into lightning and scuttled in the void like a loach. After all, being able to withstand attacks did not mean that it was not painful. If possible, he was not interested in being beaten, but at the same time, a golden sword energy with a shocking, killing aura attacked. William did not dare to resist it. He raised his hand and crushed the sword energy. It was a pity that there was an explosion. The violent energy contained in the sword energy caused William to retreat hundreds of meters. A drop of blood appeared between his eyebrows, and his skin was covered with small wounds. Swordsman Golden Sand was Right-Hanton's biological father. In the Desert Sea and Red Fire nations, he was the strongest epic professional below the legendary level. Gugas, help me kill the Lord of the City of Dawn. I'll take revenge for my 2 sons. He's lucky that I didn't kill him. This time, you can have his arm. Swordsman Golden Sand was enraged. The shield on his body was in the shape of a longsword. He was really arrogant. But the bloody-handed butcher, who was engaged in a bloody battle with Brian, was taken aback. He could not help but turn his head to look. You know that I'm a grandmaster of combat. My arm is no match for his. Are you asking me to die? Gugas was a little unwilling. But looking at the big picture, if he could seriously injure or even kill William, the Desert Sea Kingdom would definitely win. Especially William's arm. D*MN. It smelled good. So what if the attributes were different? As long as it was tough enough. I'm going to die. Besides that, William was also holding back 5 other epic experts. Both sides were fighting in different domains. Besides having to resist various debuffs, they also had to unleash shocking combat power. Many low-level professionals were dumbfounded by the scene. The players were having a great time watching as well. But it was a pity. The domain was too powerful. The broadcasters could not enter, so they could not broadcast the best scenes. But no matter what, the most dazzling blue figure in the domain must be their Royal Highness, especially his aura. He was too powerful. Even though they were thousands of meters away, they could feel his sharp aura. The others could only see several balls of light surrounding him. But different professionals were still sent flying. In a short span of 3 minutes, William was covered in blood. His elemental armor was in tatters. The others were also injured. And in this short period of time, he suddenly seized an opportunity. Thunderstrike. Thunderstrike came with its own skill. When an enemy was buffed by thunder, The user could transform into lightning and teleport to the enemy. At this moment, Laura was thousands of meters away from him. She kept casting spells to control him and enhance the others. But at that moment, Laura suddenly felt a fatal crisis. But it was too late. The 1,000-meter-long saber light split the sea of clouds and tried to cut her in half. Layers of shields appeared out of thin air. Laura was terrified. She could not block William's attack. She used all her trump cards, but she could not block William's full-powered attack. She was split into two from head to toe. Blood splattered everywhere. Her internal organs flew everywhere. However, her corpse did not fall to the ground. William casually waved his hand and kept her corpse in a space ring. Then, he teleported to kill again, in the span of 3 breaths. Another epic shield-bearer was punched through his shield with his left fist. His chest was torn open, and his heart was crushed. The epic professionals of the Desert Kingdom were furious and shocked. But William was like a fearless god of death. His combat power was unparalleled. He had said it. He was invincible in the epic realm. He was invincible. Chapter 491. From the time he killed Right-Hanton, it had only been 10 minutes since the start of the battle between the epic professionals. William had already killed 3 epic experts. How could such a strong combat power not make people tremble in fear? However, the encirclement did not disperse. The epic experts stood in pairs to prevent William from killing again. William was able to defend against the sudden attack of Thunderflash. William's teleportation skill had a weakness, and its lethality was not as strong. But His Highness's thick skin and thick flesh also caused the many experts who surrounded him to suffer greatly. Should they attack him? They could not. If they did not attack him, he would attack them. But what could they do if they attacked him? Every time, William would look pitiful, but he would explode with powerful attacks. He would charge at his enemies with the intention of perishing together with them. However, perishing together was just a saying. The Lord of the City of Dawn would not die, but the enemies who were targeted by him might not. More importantly, William seemed to have the bloodline of a super berserker. The more painful it was, the faster his recovery speed would be. Many people thought that there was a limit to this characteristic. But William had been beaten for half an hour, and he was not dead yet. Who knew what his limit was? The bloody-handed butcher, Gugas, seized the opportunity and used his supernormal punches to hit William's skull. William's hair was blown off, and his head was bleeding profusely. Gugas could feel that his extremely hard hands, which were comparable to top-notch weapons of the same level, had not cracked William's skull. How is this possible? Has his head become the head of the Thunder God? Is his strongest state bald? Otherwise, why is his head so hard? Gugas did not give William a chance to counterattack. He immediately retreated. When the others faced William's attacks, they were very careful. They stood back to back, afraid that they would be caught by William. Many of the epic experts were secretly cursing. The Lord of the City of Dawn was the real bloody-handed butcher. Gugas's small claws were like the moaning fist compared to William. The commander of the Desert Kingdom, John Cruz, saw that the situation on the epic battlefield was getting worse. He could not help but send a telepathic message to Sword Lord Golden Sand. Can you kill him? If you can't, don't fight. If this drags on, we will suffer more casualties. Just as John finished his sentence, a ray of sword light descended from the sky. In the next second, dozens of sword lights, hundreds of sword lights, tens of thousands of golden swords fell like rain. Layers upon layers, densely packed together. The sword chi that filled the sky was like a torrential downpour, making it impossible for anyone to dodge, especially when those sword lights gathered together. It was as if a 1,000-meter-long golden sword had descended from the sky. Sword Venerable Golden Sand's divine sword Skyfall, someone exclaimed. What a powerful aura. I'm not his target, but I can't move an inch. His target is the Lord of the City of Dawn. The epic professional of the Red Fire Kingdom gasped. No one knew when Sword Venerable Golden Sand had prepared this move. Previously, when everyone was on the battlefield, the Golden Sand Honorable had been attacking William nonstop. It had to be said that among the 20 or so epic professionals in the Desert Kingdom, The bloody-handed Gugas was very powerful. His fists were enough to injure William, but he could not withstand the attacks of the others. But sword Venerable Golden Sand was too powerful. Not only could his sword energy and sword techniques cause significant damage to William, but the sword energy that remained in William's body would also hinder William's recovery speed. Sure Feng was only able to endure it because he had unleashed the power of the Holy Spirit. All his attributes had increased explosively, in addition to the HP recovery effect of the Thunderbolt Heart. In short, this cunning old fox used Death Announcement and Ghost Book to reduce his HP regeneration by 30%. Damn it, no wonder that old bastard is still alive, even though the Desert Kingdom is no more. His Royal Highness cursed under his breath. He had felt that something was wrong. Although Swordsman Golden Sand's sword technique was strong, he had not used his full strength. It turned out that he had stacked a lot of buffs on him when he had attacked. In the end, it led to the appearance of the huge golden sword in the sky. He had nowhere to run, just like Thor's karma weapon, the Gungnir. However, it could also be due to the buff on his body. But no matter what, he had to resist this seemingly unstoppable sword. Venerable Swordsman Golden Sand could only watch helplessly as William was forced into the ground by the sword chi. He pressed his right hand down lightly and shouted angrily, "Die!" Rumble. The 1,000-meter-long golden longsword hit William. It was like a mountain that had forcefully slammed William into the ground. Countless sword chis exploded. The shockwaves that wreak havoc in a radius of tens of thousands of meters broke through several domains. The epic experts from both sides were severely injured. The name of Swordsman Golden Sand attracted the attention of many epic experts. He was very powerful, but they could still sense a weak aura from William's body. Someone cast a spell to disperse the smoke and dust. A huge crater appeared on the ground. William was half kneeling in the crater. He used his hands to protect his head. Electric arcs danced on his hands, but there was no trace of injury. However, his right arm, head, and upper body were all covered in bone-deep injuries. But the most shocking thing was not the hand of Thunder God that had been destroyed. Instead, it was the golden blood that flowed out from his heart and his bones that shone with golden light. This was the scene that made countless people dumbfounded. Some shield-bearers even thought that William had killed himself with a piece of tofu. When Guga saw this scene, he beat his chest with both hands and wanted to cry. He could not help but mutter, "Invincible Vajra body, Vajra. I don't want to live anymore." How did a ranger like him train to have the invincible Vajra body? What was the invincible Vajra body? If it was just the physical strength and defense of 3 points, then it was not a big deal. Instead, it was a hidden attribute that was hidden in the data. His bones were different from ordinary people. They had turned completely golden and were indestructible. His heart and bone marrow had also undergone a qualitative change. The blood in his heart was also shining with golden light. With these two attributes, it was the invincible Vajra body. It was the strongest defense that an epic professional tank could achieve. Of course, this move caused unimaginable damage to William. William lost 70% of his health points, but this also activated the invincible Vajra body. Everyone saw the flesh on the surface of William's body rolling and recovering at an unimaginable speed. *MN. Swordsman Golden Sand could not help but curse. He turned his head and transformed into a beam of golden light that disappeared into the horizon. He could not fight this battle. In particular, William had yet to use his trump card. This was his trump card that gave him legendary combat power. Everyone knew that this was his trump card, and they also knew that if this trump card was used, William would suffer severe repercussions. Swordsman Golden Sand wanted to force William to use his trump card, but the battle was already at this stage. If William did not use his trump card, then there was no need to fight anymore. It was a truce. The epic experts of the Desert Kingdom dispersed their domains and retreated to the fortress. But they stared intently at William and the experts of the Red Fire Kingdom. William was using his gaze to warn them that if they still wanted to fight, they would have to start an all-out war. The epic experts of the Desert Kingdom would also rush over. At that time, it was uncertain who would emerge victorious. Burning Cinder wielded the lava-like Dragon Slayer saber and flew to William's side. She asked, "Do you still want to fight?" William raised his eyebrows. "We can, but it's not necessary. This war doesn't belong to the City of Dawn. The longer we fight, the more we will earn. Today, we'll give the Desert Kingdom an appetizer. We'll make them abide by the rules and prevent them from causing trouble. Your Highness is wise. I feel that with your Highness's tankiness, you can definitely fight with them for another day," Ranwu said with a chuckle. William's mouth twitched. It was not a problem for him to continue fighting. His health points were as fast as before, but he was afraid that Swordsman Golden Sand would have other tricks up his sleeves. If that happened, William would be forced to start a massacre. If he used the unparalleled Holy Thunder and the intermediate elemental body separately, the effects would not be too outstanding. Of course, this was relatively speaking. If he used one of the skills separately, his combat power would increase exponentially. He would be much stronger than now, but only when he used both skills at the same time could he have legendary combat power. This was why he did not use these two skills separately. They were his true trump cards. Once he used his trump card, it would be a life-and-death battle. William would not hold back. Let's not talk about anything else. If half of the 20 epic experts of the Desert Kingdom could escape, they would be considered lucky. But if he dared to do so, he would definitely incur the wrath of the enemy legendary experts. What's more, some hidden enemies might think of ways to kill him, who was a potential threat, to prevent him from reaching the legendary level. Hence, William endured. The others did not know what he was thinking. Otherwise, he would definitely take the great supplement pill and fight 300 rounds with him. If killing 3 epic rank professionals was considered tolerating, then the experts of the Desert Kingdom would have to smile and say to Lao Wang next door, "Please continue and put in more effort." The epic battlefield had temporarily come to an end. When King Vikrul of the Red Fire Kingdom heard the news, he was overjoyed. Although it was not as wasteful as rewarding the 3 armies, the fortress and the army of players had enough to eat and drink. He even doubled the wages of the players for 7 days. Many players were so happy that their noses were bubbling, and they praised the prince for being awesome. What was William doing? He was using the thunder crystals to repair his elemental armor. Fortunately, he had obtained many thunder crystals from the thunder region. Otherwise, he would not be able to repair his elemental armor set if it was damaged. Damn, it's a loss. Why don't I fight them naked in the future without wearing any equipment? William could not help but mutter. William knew that it was not a good idea. The elemental armor gave him hundreds of points in all attributes. In addition, he had various defensive abilities and skills. It was not something that he could not wear even if he did not want to. The most important thing was, if he did not wear armor, he would be beaten until he had no clothes to wear. In a magical fantasy world, there was a possibility that his equipment would not be damaged after being beaten to death. Phew. It was a headshot. In the following days, the friction between the 2 kingdoms became more intense. Both sides sent out legions to seek opportunities to invade the enemy's territory. The 3 dwarf legions also launched several attacks, but the number of players was sufficient. Even if they suffered heavy casualties, they still completed their mission and stalled the dwarf legion. This caused the 3 dwarf kingdoms to be in a difficult position. They had no choice. Against the Death Legion, they could not fight a protracted battle. They could only fight in one wave. Otherwise, the players who kept reviving would be too difficult to deal with. As time passed, it was the first month of version 4.0. It was a beautiful April when many animals were in heat. It was a terrifying April when dark creatures were everywhere. It was the second wave of darkness invasion. It had arrived. Chapter 492. A team of 11 members from the Lonely Mountain was riding on Dragon's Blood War horses and heading west. They had been traveling for nearly 20 days. They had not encountered any obstacles or assassinations along the way, other than some reckless magical beasts suddenly rushing in front of them and suddenly trembling in fear. They had not encountered any accidents. This boring life was expected by everyone, and it was also the situation that they did not want to encounter. This meant that the Dwarf Kingdom would definitely have the determination and strength to kill Odom the moment they made a move. Old Odom, how far are we from your hometown? Battle Wizard McLean suddenly asked. Odom, who was riding on the dragon's blood horse, squeezed the horse's abdomen with his short legs and said, "Didn't we just enter the territory of the Red Fire Kingdom? If we don't take a detour, we can directly pass through the Desert Kingdom. Then, we'll be halfway there. What do you plan to do? The Red Fire Kingdom and the Desert Kingdom are at war, and William is there. We could take a detour. Anyway, I'm not in a hurry." Odom scratched his head and said embarrassedly. Akarov said nonchalantly, "Why would we take a detour? We'll go straight. Even if it's the center of the battlefield, I won't take a detour." That's not good. It might cause trouble. Odom thought of William's plan and could not help but say cautiously, "What are you afraid of? I'm a close combat wizard. Why would I take a detour just because there's danger ahead?" McLean took out a 40-meter-long broadsword and gestured. Everyone was speechless when they saw him. They did not know if he had chosen the wrong occupation. He was talented in close combat, but he had chosen to be a wizard. But his teacher was a white-robed knight, so the others could only think that he was specially chosen by the Warlock Saint. Odom got along well with the members of the Lonely Mountain team. As Odom had been the deputy city lord for so many years, his mind had been honed to be as hard as steel. He was cunning and unfathomable. How could he be arrogant or make some stupid mistakes? Moreover, the teammates that William had chosen for him were too awesome. All of them were epic professionals. All of them were famous experts from other forces. Fortunately, Odom Heavyhammer wasn't weak either. After eating the bloodline fruit, he had also regained his legendary bloodline and stepped into the epic rank. The reason why the others respected him, in addition to their good relationship with William, was that Odom was likely to become the Lord of Lonely Mountain and revive the Dwarf Empire. Just this point alone was enough for everyone to respect him. Or it could be said that no one present was the absolute leader. They were all companions that William had gathered at the last minute. Since the target had appeared, they just had to rush forward. Plan? There was no need. Strategy? There was no need. Detour? Impossible. At that moment, Roderick of the Mercenary Guild, William's old friend for version 1.0, had become an authoritative figure in the Southern Region Mercenary Guild. He had just received a transmission. After taking a look, he could not help but smile. The Red Fire Nation and the Desert Sea Nation have just engaged in an epic battle. More than 40 epic experts have participated in the battle. What's going on? Adolf, who had joined the Palace of Darkness, could not help but ask. Spy from the City of Dawn, ding dong. Ding dong. Almost everyone received the transmission. Everyone's eyes lit up when they saw the message. Cassidon exclaimed, "William is good. He killed 3 epic professionals, and one of them was an honored epic. TSK, TSK. There's also an enchanter from the Magic Sanctuary. I feel that William is in trouble. His teacher, Lakangrola, is also a werewolf." The 11 of them discussed among themselves. They seemed to be discussing if they should take the opportunity to take a look at the battlefield. But in the next second, Lancelot's expression changed when he received the message. He said in a deep voice, "The darkness invasion is coming. It will happen within 3 days." Everyone's hearts sank. Their joy had dissipated. The darkness invasion was a heavy burden on everyone's head. Even if the sky collapsed, the tall man would hold it up. The scale of the darkness invasion this time was not too large. Most of them knew that it would not pose a threat to the power of the kingdoms. But what about the next time? What about the next time? Odom glanced at Lancelot, who did not look too good. He seemed to understand that Lancelot was anxious and wanted to send Odom to the Lonely Mountain as soon as possible. Then, he would lead his troops to kill the dark creatures. So he said with good intentions, "Why don't we speed up and fly over?" Lancelot did not hesitate. He immediately rejected and said, "No need. I promised William, and I will definitely do it. But we can speed up by riding horses." "Okay, we'll go all the way. Even if there's an attack from a legendary professional, I'll make him suffer." The close combat wizard McLean took out his 40-meter-long broadsword and pointed to the west. When the others saw him, the depressing atmosphere was reduced. After all, as the clown of this team, McLean, the melee magus, had always done a good job. The traces of the Lonely Mountain team were not hidden. Many people knew their route. The 80,000 to 90,000 traveling bards in the City of Dawn released information about them every day. Every time they got closer to the Lonely Mountain, the Dwarf Kingdom, which had been targeting Odom, would feel more pressure. On the same night, in the capital of the Iron Fist Dwarf Kingdom, although it was called the capital, it was actually a giant mountain that had been hollowed out. Millions of dwarves lived in it, accounting for more than 80% of the Iron Fist dwarves. The reason why so many people could live here was not only because of the large area of the mountain, but also because there were a lot of magical metal veins and other gems under the mountain. Because of that, the city of the dwarves was built layer by layer, like a huge underground labyrinth. It was rumored that tens of millions of dwarves lived in the Lonely Mountain. The underground city inside was famous throughout the God's continent. Back then, the Flame Devil was dug out from the Lonely Mountain. Fortunately, the dwarves repelled it and sealed it completely. Another interesting thing about the dwarves was that they had always been known as feng shui masters on the God's continent. Only the dwarves were the most professional in finding magical metal hidden more than 100 meters deep. Many human empires and kingdoms who wanted to find mineral veins in their territories would generally ask for help from dwarf feng shui masters who were proficient in this technique. At this moment, the night was dark. The caves in the Iron Fist Kingdom were brightly lit. The dwarves living here did not have any discomfort. Even the sound of knocking in some deep pits was still continuous, because many dwarves were industrious and greedy. As long as they saw metal, they could not help but want to dig. As for the outside of the Iron Fist Kingdom, there seemed to be no change, but there were many more royal guards inside the palace than usual. A short and exquisite dwarf warrior was holding a knife and axe, each of them at the Grandmaster rank, and they looked very explosive. The reason for the increase in the number of royal guards was that there were 4 dwarf kings in the palace. Among them were the Iron Fist King, the Hardbeard King, the Stonefoot King, and the Blue Mountain King. Those who did not come here were the Blacklock Dwarves, the Firebeard Dwarves, and the Doolin Dwarves. In the main hall of the palace, the king of the Iron Fist Kingdom sat high on the throne. Below his buttocks was the skin of a legendary Balrog, and in each of his hands was the skull of a young Balrog. In any case, the Balrog was still a mortal enemy in the hearts of the dwarves, and all the dwarves took pride in killing the Balrog. The Iron-Fisted King looked at his 3 old friends, who were deep in thought, and said in a dignified manner, "Send out a legend to kill Odom." "Are you really going to kill him?" The Tough-Beard King smiled bitterly. The Stonefoot King sneered. Back then, the Tough-Beard dwarves were the happiest in killing him. And now you're crying like a cat crying for a mouse? Bullsh asterisk T, we have no choice. The Tough-Beard King slapped the table and was about to stand up and fight with the old guy in front of him. The Blue Mountain King frowned and said, "Enough, enough. Every time we meet, you two can quarrel, but now is not the time for you to quarrel and fight one-on-one. Odom is the problem we should solve the most right now. But I don't think it's a good idea to send out a legendary professional. There are many epic professionals in that team, and they are all talented rising stars. Ordinary legendary professionals may not be able to kill Odom. Is there a legendary assassin in the 4 kingdoms?" The Iron Fist King narrowed his eyes and said with a fierce look, "Then look for the Shadow Killer Alliance. The asking price is too high. Yes, it's too expensive." The Blue Mountain King rolled his eyes helplessly. "We'll pay for the assassins together. Now is not the time to save money. If Odom is killed, even if the Lord of the City of Dawn participates in the war between the Red Fire Kingdom and the Desert Kingdom, his ultimate goal will not be the Lonely Mountain. But just sending the assassins of the Shadow Killer Alliance doesn't seem to be enough, right?" The Tough-Beard King frowned. The Stonefoot King laughed when he heard this. He suddenly said, "Actually, I'm in contact with Gert. Ever since they were driven out of the legendary continent, they're so poor that they can barely afford to eat. As long as we give him enough benefits, he will also send people to help stop the Lonely Mountain team. Let the orc experts create trouble first, and then the assassins will find a chance to kill them. Are we going to cooperate with the orcs again? The tough-beard king sighed. He looked at the expressions of his 3 old friends and did not say anything else. If we don't cooperate, are we going to watch him open the gate of the Lonely Mountain? Yes. Are we going to give all the treasures in the Lonely Mountain to Odom for nothing? Do you know how many treasures there are in the Lonely Mountain? It might be more than all of our treasures combined. The Blue Mountain King muttered, "It's been hundreds of years. Give us another 6 or 7 years, and we can open the gate. Then, with the 4 of us, we can restore the glory of the Lonely Mountain. However, the throne will not belong to the Hammer tribe." Speaking of the throne, the 4 people in the hall could not help but fall silent. However, the Iron Fist King broke the silence and said in a deep voice, "It's too early to talk about the throne. The most important thing is to get rid of Odom. What about the 3 old guys? They have also killed many dwarves of the Hammer tribe. Their hands are also stained with blood. Now that they don't want to continue being executioners, we will help them get rid of them. However, don't tell them about the assassination of Odom, in case there are more accidents." A cold light flashed in the Iron Fist King's eyes. The 7 dwarven kingdoms were once the 7 dwarven clans. They had all betrayed the Hammer tribe. Some of them regretted it at that time. They had also stirred up trouble many times, so that the bloodline of the Hammer tribe had been preserved until now. But was it too late for them to regret? Maybe after Odom Hammer regained control of the Lonely Mountain, he might forgive those who had helped him. But the most ruthless executioners like them would definitely not escape death. Not holding a grudge? That was millions of people who were related to the tribe by blood. They were all dwarves with the surname Hammer, coupled with hundreds of years of hunting. Only Odom was left. You said he was not holding a grudge? Tell it to a child. Chapter 493. The darkness invasion was imminent, but the nations of the gods' continent were not as unprepared as before. In the 5 years of the previous version, the small dukedoms had been annexed by the grand dukedoms. The strongest professionals in the grand dukedoms were epic professionals, so they knew a lot of things. The grand dukedoms had prepared all kinds of military resources. They had placed cannons, catapults, and heavy-duty crossbows on the city walls. Now, they were looking for mercenaries to help defend the city. As a result, the mercenary market in the legendary continent became lively. However, only the City of Dawn was at the top. This was because the City of Dawn had close to 1 million regular soldiers and 8 million players. They could all be hired, but the price of hiring a regular army was higher. However, the City of Dawn had obtained countless military achievements in the war against the Orc Empire. Such military achievements were enough to make many small nations look up to them. If they could hire 100,000 regular soldiers of the City of Dawn, they would definitely be able to protect their nation. Fortunately, the City of Dawn had a legion of chosen ones. These chosen ones were cheap and had good combat power. More importantly, they had the courage to kill. They were a group of emotionless undead soldiers. If it was too expensive to hire the regular soldiers of the City of Dawn, it would be better to hire players. Paul Bain's Eastern Region Mercenary Alliance and the Arctic Legion of the Northern Region. But the mercenary warriors were normal people, and they would die. Even if their prices were not as high as the regular soldiers of the City of Dawn, they were not cheap. As a result, the players became the most desirable targets of the Darkness Invasion. Due to the war between the Red Fire Nation and the Desert Nation, William mobilized 800,000 players. Most of these 800,000 players were in version 1.0 and 2.0. Most of them had reached the advanced level or were close to it. As for the remaining 3 million players, most of them were at the intermediate level. There were even some novice beginners. Originally, these players could only do simple mercenary missions such as fighting, running errands, catching magical beasts, and other small missions. But the Darkness Invasion arrived. The 3 million players instantly received the notification of the main storyline quest, and there were as many as 15 of them. If it weren't for the fact that they couldn't split themselves into 2, they would have exhausted themselves from receiving these main storyline quests. There were 15 S-level main storyline missions because there were 15 Grand Dukedoms in the legendary continent. When the 15 Grand Dukedoms submitted employment applications to the City of Dawn, William provided these missions to the players. Each of the 15 Grand Duchies had 200,000 players. It seems to be a little too scattered. I might not be able to hold on. The prince, who had been studying how to make money, now felt a little regretful. If he had known this would happen, he would have rejected a few Grand Duchies so that the players would not be so scattered. That way, the Dawn mercenary team could maintain a 100% completion rate. There were actually two types of employment missions. One was to directly pay a large sum of money, and the hired person would be responsible for completing the task without any additional payment. The other was to fight every day and work together with the employer to complete the mission. The City of Dawn was very powerful, but he did not want to attract too much hatred. Hence, he chose the second method. He would give them money to fight and work together to complete the missions. Well, after all, he had calculated that the second method of employment would allow him to earn more gold coins every day because he knew that the second wave of dark creatures would last for a long time. However, this was also what he was worried about. The members were too scattered. However, right after that, he received another message. In order to compete with the City of Dawn, the Eastern Mercenary Alliance and the Arctic Legion had lowered their hiring prices. Hence, the Grand Duchies not only had the players of the City of Dawn, but also many powerful NPC mercenaries. It seems that we won't lose so easily. But to prevent the players from being bullied, I have to send some experts to help. After all, the mercenaries are not that harmonious. If not for the experts, the Eastern Mercenary Alliance and the Arctic Legion will definitely bully the cute little sheep. This shows the benefits of having a strong camp. We don't have to be afraid of being bullied by the NPCs. When William thought of this, he heaved a sigh of relief. He had already made preparations. If the Grand Duchies could not hold on, the City of Dawn would exert pressure on them. The City of Dawn exerted pressure on them, forcing them to spend money to hire their own regular army. Otherwise, they would have to wait for the destruction of their country. William believed that when that time came, even the stingiest king and nobles would not give up on their duchies and families. When the time came, the City of Dawn would make a fortune, and their country would survive. It was a win-win situation. No one would lose out. He could also make use of this opportunity to sell equipment, skills, tools, potions, secret manuals, and so on. He could reap a good harvest. Although two large mercenary teams and some small mercenary teams had snatched a portion of his profits, at least they could share the burden. But William could also sense that the City of Dawn had sent mercenary missions to the entire legendary continent. He did not interfere much in the northern and western regions. He had only set up strongholds in the Grand Duchies. But he had made use of the immortality of the Chosen Ones and their low prices to seize a large portion of the mercenary market. He had not interfered with the mercenary missions of many kingdoms, but he had already incurred the hostility of many mercenary legions. Now that they had lowered their prices to compete with him, it seemed like they could still compete fairly. But they had to compensate for the deaths of their members. If they continued to do this, they would definitely incur losses. In the future, they might even join forces against him. So it's not time to worry about them. Although I've seized a large portion of the mercenary market, there are only so many people in the City of Dawn. It's not like I've taken every piece of meat. William took out a small notebook and wrote down this problem. Then he ignored it. What were the millions of regular soldiers of the City of Dawn going to do? Of course, they were going to attack. William wanted to take advantage of the fact that the second wave of the Darkness invasion was not strong enough to find the underground devil's dens that were scattered all over the legendary continent. He wanted to give some legions an invincible legion buff. In particular, the second wave of the Darkness invasion would not only target the human Grand Duchies. There would also be many neutral camps, such as the Serafkin, half-elves, dwarves, and Tauren. These small tribes with only tens of thousands of members could be found in the forests, grasslands, and mountain ranges of the legendary continent. They were also under great pressure when facing the Darkness invasion. William was not interested in earning their money. He only wanted to uphold his identity as a messenger of justice. He wanted to send the regular legions to help them resolve the danger. He wanted to use the excuse that it was too dangerous outside to bring them back to the City of Dawn for protection. D*MN, I've made a killing. William laughed mischievously. This was his biggest plan. He did not dare to attack the human Grand Duchies, so he used the hiring method to achieve a win-win situation. Anyway, he felt that it should be a win-win situation. As for the other small factions, they did not have any backers. He would use this excuse to kidnap them and take the opportunity to increase the population of the City of Dawn. If everything went according to plan. After the second wave of the Darkness invasion was resolved, the City of Dawn could increase its population by a few million. They were not humans. They were made up of various races. To the other factions, the cities would not be able to accommodate so many races. This would cause conflicts and even fights. However, William's endowments were amazing. No matter how unhappy these races were at the beginning, they could only say that it was delicious under William's persuasion. William closed his small notebook. He wanted to take advantage of the fact that there were no major enemies in version 4.0. He wanted to speed up his development and strive to become a high-level neutral camp on the legendary continent. Even if he could not become a first-tier camp like the Temple of Light, he wanted to become a second-tier neutral camp like the City of Chaos. Time flew by, and soon, 3 days had passed. The border conflicts between the Red Fire Nation and the Desert Nation did not stop just because the Darkness invasion was imminent. Instead, they became more and more intense. Although there were no large-scale battles between the two sides, at least hundreds or thousands of people died at the border every day. The three dwarf legions often attacked the border defense line and fought with the players. However, the equipment of the dwarf legion was too good. The money-minded players were not afraid of death. If the dwarf legion dared to come, they would dare to rob them of their equipment. However, the dwarven army was very powerful. The majority of the dwarven army's members were high-tiered and intermediate-tiered professionals, including the attribute amplification from their bloodlines. Each dwarven army could solo 4 or 5 players. Moreover, with the dwarven army's formation, the dwarven army's players had no hope of survival. If the dwarf legion did not want to suffer too many losses, the players would not have been able to hold on. Therefore, the players felt that they were not getting any benefits. They felt that they were using experience points to exchange for equipment. It was a little disadvantageous. As the players fought, their experience points would be depleted, and they would even drop levels and equipment. The sky is a little gloomy. I heard that the Darkness invasion will occur in the next 2 days. There shouldn't be any devil's dens appearing on this battlefield, right? Changli Jioga looked at the sky and sighed. Xiao Ayan walked to him with her slender legs. She picked up a fruit that was worth 3 gold coins and took a bite. She said vaguely, "I don't think so. Didn't His Highness say that the Darkness invasion is mainly aimed at the Grand Duchies? They will attack those forces that have fewer epic experts." Yes, now that the two kingdoms have so many epic experts at the border, they shouldn't make such a low-level mistake. Chu Yochio nodded with certainty. However, as soon as he finished speaking, more than 10,000 meters west of the players' encampment, there was a continuous rumbling sound near the dwarfs' encampment. Many devil's dens were rising from the ground. Countless dark creatures were like marching ants in the desert, madly attacking the dwarfs' encampment not far away. There were many demons flying in the sky. Xiao Ayan opened her mouth and couldn't help but look at the dumbfounded Chu Yochio. Did he have a jinx? Did he have to be so accurate? At the same time, Chu Yochio also received a lot of transmitted messages. Not only was the Blue Mountain Dwarf Army in front of them being attacked by the dark creatures, but the Iron Fist Dwarf Army and the Hardbeard Dwarf Army were also being attacked. What should we do? Should we take advantage of the situation and attack the Lover's Army from both sides? Someone's eyes lit up and couldn't help but shout. Yes, let these dwarves enjoy the feeling of having their buttholes explode all over the mountain. That's not good. Although the dwarves are the enemy, the dark creatures are the real enemies. Many female players couldn't bear to watch. Although they were enemies, no matter how they looked at it, the dark creatures were more terrifying. They were less humanoid. They could fight with the dwarves because both sides had accepted some kind of employment mission. Moreover, there were simply too many dark creatures. Even if there were 80,000 to 90,000 dwarves in front of them, there were more than 100 devil caverns. More than 600,000 to 700,000 dark creatures had emerged from them. If nothing unexpected happened, these dwarves, who had once dropped equipment for them, would be annihilated today. Then we won't go. At most, we'll just let them kill each other while we take advantage of the situation. All right, Ming Ming, I've saved up a lot of money recently and want to buy a warhorse. I'll take you for a stroll when the time comes. Someone laughed and willingly played the role of a bootlicker. Unfortunately, the girl named Meng Meng refused. Thanks, big bro, but I have a big bro who bought a griffin and wants to take me to the sky to fly and eat cotton candy on top of the clouds. The male player fell into silence. It had to be said that after the Citadel started selling dark creatures, there were many melodramatic situations among the players. The female players would rather cry while sitting on a griffin than laugh while riding on a horse. There are no dark creatures near the Crimson Fire and desert fortresses, but they're already fighting, someone reported after receiving the news. Changli Jioga took a deep breath. These 3 dwarven legions are finished. The Crimson Fire Kingdom won't give the Desert Kingdom a chance to support them. Look, who are those people? Someone exclaimed and pointed into the distance. Such dazzling blonde hair, so wild, so familiar, and such a short horse. Isn't that the Vice City Lord? Someone opened his eyes wide. And that little girl Lancelot, that's the Lonely Mountain Squad. They're charging towards the Dwarven Legion. Ding dong. At this time, all the players at the border receive a mission. Justice regardless of race. The Darkness Invasion has arrived on a large scale. Our enemies just now were surrounded by dark creatures. Draw your swords and save the dwarves who are fighting alone. We don't need dark creatures to interfere in our war. Mission difficulty, A+, mission objective. Save at least 150,000 dwarves from the 3 dwarven legions. Mission reward? Experience reward? At the same time, one of the half-elf commanders of the regular army of the City of Dawn, who had been hiding among the players, drew his sword and shouted at the countless players and professionals. Prince William said that we don't need dark creatures to interfere in our war. Save the dwarves, then we'll fight to the death. The half-elf commander rode on his warhorse and slowly turned around. He raised his sword and shouted, "Charge with me! Charge!" The players were overjoyed, and their faces were filled with pride. They thought to themselves, as expected of His Highness, he has such a strong sense of justice. Prince William is domineering. Prince William is awesome. Prince William is handsome. Our William is the true messenger of justice, the apostle of light. That's right. We don't need dark creatures to interfere in our war with the dwarves. Let's save this group of dwarves and decide the outcome. Chapter 494. The Dwarf Kingdom didn't expect that hundreds of devil's dens would appear near the army. When they received the message, in addition to the messenger's cry for help, there were also countless terrifying roars, as if demons were whispering in their ears. It was the sound of hell. It was the sound of the dark world. It was obvious that the dark creatures had already rushed into the army camp. The 3 dwarf kingdoms wanted to seek help from the Desert Kingdom, but the Red Fire Kingdom had declared a full-scale war. The epic professionals in the fortress didn't dare to act rashly. In order to ensure that the fortress wouldn't be robbed, they didn't dare to send reinforcements. Therefore, the Dwarf Kingdom could only send their epic-ranked experts to help. However, they also knew that by the time they flew over, the 3 armies of 300,000 dwarves would have suffered heavy losses, and they were afraid that epic demons would appear and rush into the army. If that was the case, none of the 3 dwarven armies would be left alive. The cannons were roaring. There were only 30 cannons, but they played a big role on a battlefield of this scale. Each cannonball was enough to blow up dozens of enemies within a dozen meters into pieces. The only drawback was that there were too few cannons. Heavy arrows, accompanied by sonic booms, pierced through the dark creatures one after another. In this kind of dense attack, the heavy crossbow arrows were very effective. The few cannon masters were using long guns and short cannons to launch ranged attacks. Beams of light spewed out, and countless dark creatures were harvested in large numbers. The short cannons were blasting out, and the area within a radius of dozens of meters was covered in flames. Everything in front of them was turned into ashes. The mages were also casting all kinds of area of effect magic and amplification magic. But even so, the dwarf army still couldn't stop the dark creatures that suddenly appeared. Not only were there too many of them, moreover, they were coming from all directions, directly surrounding the military camp like a dumpling. There were too many positions that needed to be defended. The dwarf shield warriors guarded the front, constantly bursting out spear and sword energies, resisting wave after wave of attacks at the cost of their own lives. More and more people were dying every second, and more shield warriors were needed to hold them off. There weren't enough shield warriors. The warriors had to come over to fill the gap. In a short span of 3 minutes, Chun Fan's eyes lit up. Several thousand of the more than 90,000 Blue Mountain dwarves had already perished in battle. The battle had entered a white-hot stage from the very beginning. Dwarven warriors of the Blue Mountain, maintain the formation, maintain the formation. A Grandmaster Dwarven commander roared. As he handed his flag to the deputy army commander, he leaped into the air and charged into the army of dark creatures like a cannonball. Streaks of 100-meter-long saber chi wreaked havoc among the dark creatures. However, before he could kill too many of them, a Grandmaster-level demon charged at him, and the two of them engaged in an intense melee. This group of stubborn and hard-to-deal-with dwarves were famous throughout the world and were able to establish kingdoms and even empires. This proved that they possessed great strength and ability. Therefore, the dwarves weren't afraid of war. Even in the face of ferocious and terrifying dark creatures, they still wouldn't retreat half a step. However, there were just too many dark creatures, and they appeared too quickly. The dwarven camp, which was in a truce with the player army, was almost defenseless. Therefore, from the very beginning, many of the army formations in the camp had already been broken by countless dark creatures. As a result, the dwarves had to find an opportunity to break out of the encirclement and take revenge in the future. This was because the first wave of enemies wasn't skeleton soldiers or undead creatures. Instead, it was an army of death knights. This group of guys who had been resurrected from the dead on the battlefield had powerful combat power. They weren't afraid of death and didn't know pain. They only knew how to swing their blades at their enemies. Moreover, there were a total of 6 such death knights. The impact of their attacks was not something that ordinary shield warriors could withstand. In particular, the incubus warhorses they were riding were comparable to dragonblood warhorses. Why is the strength of this wave of darkness invasion so exaggerated? Why are they here? Look at that fiery red flag. This dark army seems to be under the command of a legendary fire demon lord. Damn it, someone cursed. According to their speculation, there might be a fire demon who had a grudge against the dwarves and had taken advantage of the second wave of darkness invasion to bring these dark creatures here. Captain, where's our cavalry? We can't defend for much longer. A young dwarf shield warrior whose right arm had been chopped off could not help but ask with bloodshot eyes. There was black blood flowing out of the wound. He had already been infected by the dark aura. The seemingly middle-aged dwarf captain slashed a few dark creatures with his longsword. He then casually released a sword aura and knocked a death knight to the ground. Only then did he turn his head and wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth. That's our last resort. It's not the time to attack yet. Is that so? The dwarf warrior with the severed arm looked back. Their cavalry was already gathering rapidly. However, they weren't charging east, but west, in the direction of their home. However, he looked at the endless dark creatures in front of him and the few armies that were bitterly resisting the attacks on both sides. He could not help but ask with his eyes wide open, "Are we going to cover their retreat?" The middle-aged dwarf captain was silent for a moment. He once again repelled a strong enemy and stabilized the defensive line. When he spoke again, some of the dwarf warriors next to him pricked up their ears. They only heard him say in a low voice, "Yes, the 3rd, 5th, 8th, and 13th legions are responsible for covering the rear in the east. There are also some legions responsible for covering the rear in the north and south. Hearing this, some of the dwarf warriors' morale was obviously a little low. However, they still did not retreat. The dwarf captain laughed bitterly in his heart, but he still said heartily, "But leave this kind of thing to us veterans. You new recruits are just a hindrance. When the cavalry troops launch an attack, you guys will also leave." The young warriors in the legion did not say anything. They just clenched their swords in their hands. How could they abandon their comrades and retreat alone? Moreover, since they were carrying the military order to cover the rear, they could not retreat. Perhaps if one of them ran, more of their clansmen would be killed by the dark creatures. However, just when they thought that the cavalry was about to break out of the encirclement, there was a loud rumble. A devil's den suddenly exploded, and flames surged into the clouds. It was an epic flame demon, more than 20 meters tall, holding a giant magma sword and rushing toward them step by step. Every step of the flame demon crushed countless dark creatures. But the dark creatures did not care, and the flame demon did not care either. But every step of this tall flame demon was like a war drum beating the hearts of the dwarf warriors. That kind of terrifying momentum was simply suffocating. And the key was, the position where the flame demon appeared was due west. Despair. It was surging in their hearts. If it was only a Grandmaster demon, it would be fine. They had also encountered an epic flame demon. Their fate was almost sealed. Aguchiwa. The flame demon roared and suddenly slashed down with its giant sword. There was a harsh sound of friction in the air. A flaming sword, energy hundreds of meters long, descended from the sky, as if to tear the sky and the earth apart. The Dwarf Legion commanders were roaring loudly. Everyone activated their battle energy shield at this moment to form an Legion buff to resist this sword. But they also knew they were just a high-level Legion, not a Grandmaster Legion. This sword fell. At least thousands, tens of thousands of people would fall under this sword. However, at this moment, the hero unit appeared. A thunder hammer, accompanied by dazzling lightning, broke the flaming sword energy that was about to land on the ground. Then, the hammer flew back again. At the same time, a figure shining with lightning appeared in the center of the military camp. It was him. He was a handsome man with blonde hair. At least in the eyes of many dwarves, they thought that this blonde dwarf with wavy hair was their handsome man, especially his temperament. He looked like a powerful dwarf from a large dwarf family. As for the enraged flame demon, another opponent appeared in front of him. "May I know who you are?" Many army commanders were surprised. They didn't know that there was such a handsome, golden-haired thunder epic profession in the 7 Dwarven Kingdoms. "Deputy City Lord of Dawn, Odom Heavyhammer," the latter replied calmly. Then, ignoring the shock, confusion, and panic on everyone's faces, he bluntly said, "Don't even think about running. There are more than 600,000 dark creatures surrounding you, and they've already surrounded you in layers. However, the chosen ones of the City of Dawn are not people who will leave you in the lurch. They have already charged over. As long as we work together, these dark creatures won't be able to resist for long." "You?" Someone was about to speak. Odom once again flew high into the sky. He raised the thunder hammer high into the air. He attracted countless lightning bolts and directed them to the ground. In an instant, all the dark creatures within a radius of 600 to 700 meters were wiped out. A huge crater appeared on the ground, as if it had been smashed by the hammer. But in the next second, an epic demon hidden in the dark suddenly slashed at him, causing him to fall into the dark tide. Countless dwarves could not help but exclaim when they saw this scene. Their eyes flashed with genuine worry. They had long heard of Odom Heavyhammer's name. It was rumored that he was the last bloodline of the Lonely Mountain. They also knew that he had formed a Lonely Mountain team. However, they did not expect to encounter the members of the Lonely Mountain team at their most desperate moment. They had even been saved by them. Of course, there were very few epic experts on this battlefield. The other members of the Lonely Mountain team were rescuing the Dwarf Legions on other battlefields. "What should we do? Guard this place and wait for reinforcements?" a dwarf asked. The deputy commander of the Blue Mountain Dwarf Legion, the Great Mage, said in a deep voice, "Wait." Then he glanced at the puzzled crowd. Then he closed his eyes, and a huge water mirror magic reflection appeared in the sky. The dwarves looked up. The dense mass of the Dawn army was less than a kilometer away from the dark creatures. It was not the players who did not have sufficient combat power. It was the Dawnmail model team, the Half-Elf Legion, and the veterans who had been to the battlefield in the far north. They could not see the end of the battlefield. Then, hundreds of buglers stood up. A loud and muffled horn sound reverberated in the sky. It was the horn sound of the City of Dawn. It was the horn sound of the counterattack. It was the end of the Second Era. The horn sound of all races in the gods' continent launching a counterattack against the dark world. This sound, it was like a memory hidden in the bloodline. The moment the bugle horn sounded, the wind blew. Both the dwarves and the dark army could not help but stop attacking and look at the Dawn army. Because at this moment, everyone thought of the majestic counterattack at the end of the Second Era. Chapter 495. Then, the horn for the counterattack was blown. The City of Dawn and the dwarfs cooperated to launch a counterattack. The dark creatures were not very intelligent. Low-level creatures did not have high intelligence. This meant that they did not have to worry about morale. Even if they were attacked from both sides, they were fearless. It was simple. If they were reckless, it would be over. However, the players did not have to worry about morale either. They charged forward and killed the dark creatures. They were just going to die. Come on, come on. Who's afraid of who? The dark creatures were not afraid of death, but it was as if the fourth calamity was afraid of death. The shield-bearers charged forward. When they approached the army of dark creatures, they raised their shields and charged forward. In an instant, the dark creatures in front of them were smashed into pieces. From a high vantage point, it looked as if two huge white and black tides had collided. The scene was magnificent, and it made one's blood boil. The warriors flew over the shield-bearers' heads and released sword energy and sword energy. They charged into the army of dark creatures valiantly. The rangers and magician players did not even need to aim. They just shot at the dark creatures. As for whether they would injure the frontline players, did it have anything to do with them? They were not the ones who died. After all, it was the damage output. The damage output was the key. In every war mission, there would be a leaderboard for the damage output. The mission rewards would be based on the damage output. This was the main reason why the players risked their lives to die. As for the assassin players, of course, they would just watch. From time to time, they would sneak up with their short swords and daggers to kill the dark creatures. Then, they would retreat. It cannot be helped. It was too easy. They could deal enough damage, and they could even use their skills. But if they were not careful, they would die without a complete corpse. Other than the assassins who wore cowhide equipment, normal assassins could only slack around and pick up equipment. This was how life was like for them. In short, assassins could pick up equipment and materials very quickly. They did not lose out in war missions. However, there were many changes in version 4.0. The most important change was that the players had reached the advanced level. Forever Alone from the Golden Age Club was also on the battlefield. He had many professional players who wore legendary equipment. Their combat power was not weak either. These players were very brave in the Dark Torrent. They were the vanguard of the players. They followed the regular army and attacked. Or in other words, among the players, professional players, rich players, and guild players all had dark gold, epic, and legendary set equipment. This group of people had closed the bloodline gap between themselves and the NPCs in all aspects, which was enough for them to explode with powerful strength. At this time, Forever Alone was no longer a ranger. When version 4.0 was released, he had switched to a launcher, and his damage was even more explosive. His long spear and short cannon shot out a burst of azure light. Within a radius of dozens of meters, he was practically invincible. However, not all dark creatures were trash. An extremely fast Death Knight rode on a nightmare warhorse and charged at him. Forever Alone didn't retreat. Instead, he charged forward. The spear in his hand disappeared into thin air, and two hand cannons appeared in his hands. He aimed them at the Death Knight. Rumble. A violent blue shockwave burst out. The Undead Knight, who was also an advanced Undead Knight, was sent flying along with its mount. The Undead Knight's body also received a continuous burn damage. Fortunately, the Undead Knight had a lot of HP. The instant it rolled off its nightmare warhorse, it transformed into a shadow and appeared before Forever Alone. Sword draw. Whoosh. A pitch-black sword light slashed upwards. Forever Alone was heavily injured, but he did not fall to the ground. His HP bar did not decrease, and he did not stop fighting. With a quick knee strike, he sent the Death Knight flying into the air. Once again, he raised his spear and shot out a ray of azure light like a sniper rifle. Bang! A huge hole appeared in the Undead Knight's chest. However, before the Undead Knight could land, once again, Forever Alone took out 2 hand cannons and fired consecutive shots at the Undead Knight in midair. This advanced Undead Knight could not even fly. In the end, the instant the Undead Knight landed, he raised his spear and fired an energy burst, directly killing the Undead Knight. F***CK, a high-tier leader boss solo, and he was killed instantly. Many players were dumbfounded. They did not expect the launcher class to be so overpowered. The vice captain of Shengshi team was riding a wild boar and charging around. As the main tank of Shengshi team, he was jealous when he saw this scene. He could not help but mutter, "That's too naughty." Our leader was originally a top ranger, but now that he has changed his class to a launcher, his shots seem to be even fiercer and longer. How are we supposed to survive this? Forever Alone did not want to speak. He had never played this class before, so he definitely did not know how difficult it was to play and how expensive it was to pay. Firstly, launchers had very few defensive methods. After using some physical skills to increase the distance between them, they had to follow up with other skills. Otherwise, they would become a target. Secondly, there was no justice in spending money. His damage output was all done with gold coins. It was like a hand cannon shot for 3 gold coins. Energy burst shot for 10 gold coins. An energy burst that filled the sky was worth 100 gold coins. This was because every time he attacked, he had to watch as the energy bar of his mana equipment decreased. If he wanted to maintain this level of combat power, he had to immediately replace the mana crystals after they depleted. Although this kind of mana equipment could use battle energy and equipment energy, the energy of the equipment was the main point. The equipment energy could reduce the cooldown time of the launcher's skills. This was the key reason why the launcher's firepower was so strong. He only wanted to say that if the club wanted him to continue playing this class, they had to provide him with a large amount of funds. William had said this before. To the players, when they reached an advanced level, the launcher was their real boss. Although many professional players had become advanced professionals at the end of the previous version, it was nearing the finals, and it was not suitable for them to change to a new class. When version 4.0 was released, basically all the major clubs had people who had changed to this new class. Anyway, to the players, they were going to beat the new boss of most of the classes. Especially to the rich players, they had finally encountered a cool place where they could spend money. For example, Lucky Dream, Mars Strength, Earth is not as big as the moon, and other super rich players had all changed to launchers in version 4.0. According to them, this lousy game was a place where they had nowhere to spend money. They could not even buy pets. In the previous version, they only needed to get a legendary equipment set. They could not spend money anymore. At most, they could repair their equipment. They could not buy pets even if they wanted to. But now, there was finally a place where they could continue to spend money. The appearance of the Beast Taming Citadel gave them a place to buy magical beasts. To these super rich players, if their pets died, they would continue to buy. If their pets died again, they would buy again. But the launcher was even more awesome. If you had a hand cannon, I had 2, and they were both legendary equipment. If you had 2, fine. I had 3. When I fought, I would not use magical crystals. I would use hand cannons. It would be faster. This showed that they were different from ordinary players. So, the Darkness Invasion was not just a counterattack by the players and dwarves. It was also a super moment for the launcher to shine. Similarly, Many players who own magical beasts also showed great lethality in this battle. Only some people were too rash, directly killing their own magical beasts. They didn't even have time to cry. In fact, on this battlefield, they couldn't even bring their former magical beasts back to compensate for their losses. But no matter what, the launcher was very powerful in clearing monsters. The other advanced professions did not have such firepower, not even magicians. For a while, even though the war was still going on, many players on the forum were discussing how awesome the launcher was. One of the videos of Forever Alone's battles were also posted up. Many players wanted to weaken the launcher class. These players were basically mage players. They felt that the launcher class had robbed them of the exposure they should have had in this version. Logically speaking, advanced mage players should have many good area of effect skills. In the future, they would be popular in dungeons and group battles. But the launcher class was obviously competing with them. Many bitter players complained on the forum that this was a game for the rich. Ordinary people could not afford to play it. But some players posted many videos of launcher players dying tragically in the mouths of dark creatures. This video indirectly showed that if the launcher wanted to be powerful, he had to have insane equipment. He had to rely on his powerful output to prevent enemies from getting close. As long as the enemies got close, if his reaction speed was slow and his maneuvering was not sharp enough, he would die on the spot. Because the launcher was too fragile, their magical equipment did not increase their defense. Their lack of close combat skills was also a weakness. In a guild war, as long as the assassin had top-notch maneuvering and techniques, he could easily kill a launcher. The players chatted as they fought. The dwarves were extremely touched. Through the water mirror in the sky, they saw the professionals of the Dawn Army rushing into the Dark Army to save them. They were so touched that tears welled up in their eyes, especially when they saw many chosen ones coming back to life again and again, just to slash at their enemies. Many dwarves felt that their conscience had been eaten by dogs. Why? Why are we enemies? If the Dawn Army was surrounded by the dark creatures, will we help them? Will we disregard our own lives and help them? Damn it, don't say anymore. I saw a lot of cute girls wearing colorful skirts charging into the Dark Army. It made my heart ache to see them. They look like children of my daughter's age. Even if they can be revived, their courage is that of the warriors of the dwarves. Many dwarves were suspicious. Why did they participate in this war that had nothing to do with them? What did the War of the Human Kingdom have to do with them? Ever since they confronted the Dawn Army, the other party had not initiated an attack, but the dwarves had launched many raids according to orders. Now, the other party had disregarded their past enmity and came to rescue them. In that case, who were they fighting for? And what was their goal in fighting this war? Was it the Lonely Mountain? Just as someone was thinking about Odom Heavyhammer, a space tunnel suddenly appeared in the sky. Several epic orcs suddenly rushed towards Odom, who was fighting fiercely with the devils. At the same time, an assassin in the shadows hid among the corpses of the Dark Army and prepared for a fatal attack. He was an assassin from the Shadow Alliance. As long as he paid enough money, he could also kill legendary warriors. Chapter 496. The assassins targeting Odom appeared at the same time as the Darkness Invasion. It had to be said that they had seized a good opportunity. This was because Odom was suddenly ambushed by many Beastman assassins while he was fighting the demons. He was caught off guard and spat out a mouthful of blood. He was stabbed into the ground with a sword, and who knew how many of his bones were broken? If not for the bottle of water of life in his mouth, allowing him to recover to full HP, the Hidden Shadow assassin might have finished him off with one strike. However, Odom had not resolved the crisis yet. The Lonely Mountain team was at their most scattered. There were only Adolf and Legolas on the battlefield, and they were still entangled by the epic demons. Odom was facing an epic demon and 6 epic orcs. No matter how much water of life he had, he would not be able to hold on for long. After all, not everyone was a prince. As a lightning-type professional, he was now fighting against Thor 55. However, Odom could not hold on for more than 30 seconds before he was seriously injured. At this moment, the eyes of the assassins hidden in the pile of corpses lit up. The most awkward situation on the battlefield had occurred. The reinforcements of the three dwarf kingdoms suddenly arrived. There were 4 epic experts rushing over from afar. The group of dwarf experts who did not know what was going on saw Odin helping his people fight against the demons and the orcs. They immediately shouted, "Dwarf brother, hold on. We're coming to save you." Then, 3 epic dwarves rushed forward and temporarily took some of the pressure off Odin. But in this situation, the group of beastman killers couldn't figure it out. What the F***CK? A pale orc carrying a mace looked confused. Your king hired us to be assassins at a high price, and you're here to save this guy. Buddy, are you sure you are not playing us? Damn it, what do we do now? The 6 epic orc assassins were at a loss. The leader of the orcs clenched his fists and said in a muffled voice, "Continue killing. As long as we kill Odin, those dwarves will still pay us. Even if those dwarves dare to play us, His Majesty will make it clear to them. At the very least, he will give us half of the bounty. Otherwise, I don't believe that a mere dwarf kingdom can keep an eye on a saint's aura. But I think this group of people is just pretending to be benevolent. They're probably putting on a show for Odin's companions. At the critical moment, they'll give us a chance to take action." Many Beastman experts rushed over and directly unleashed their domains in the center of the battlefield. All kinds of domains covered thousands of meters, and countless darkness creatures fell in droves. Many dwarves still had lingering fears. Fortunately, their battlefield was not inside the barracks. Otherwise, it would have been their clansmen who had been seriously injured. Because of this, they did not dare to move the battlefield to another location. They could only guard Odin and fight the orcs to the death. After all, they saw the Dawn army charging towards them. At this time, the Dwarven army was facing a lot less pressure. Their group of experts could fight in the Dark Race army, so there was naturally no need to shift positions. In just 10 minutes, the more both sides fought, the angrier they became. They were also puzzled. Why were the orcs here? The dwarves were thinking, what's going on? Why do orcs like to bully us dwarves? While the dark creatures were ambushing, you came to kill a wave of them. Aren't you giving us some face? The 6 epic Beastman assassins were muttering to themselves. Can't you stop blocking? It's fine if you show off to Odin's companions, but you have already injured me. If you keep attacking, I won't be merciful. The scale of the battle was getting bigger. More and more epic experts appeared. Many of the players felt a little dizzy. But where was William? What a coincidence. He and the shadow assassins were hiding in the same pile of corpses, and they were right in front of him. William used his small claws to touch his chin. He looked at the calm shadow assassins, who were ready to attack at any moment. He was considering whether he should attack and kill them first. There was nothing wrong with that. He had used the beast god's transformation artifact. At this moment, he had transformed into a cute little mole. He was crawling around the corpses, as if he was looking for food. But don't be mistaken. Even if William was a 10-centimeter long mole, he was still an epic meat shield. His combat power was off the charts, and his health points were flowing out in tons. But he had used the aura concealment scroll from the ink guide, so no one could detect his abnormality. The shadow assassins had already noticed him and deliberately glanced at him. But it seemed that his brain was filled with **T. No, it should be more accurate to say that his brain was filled with ideas on how to assassinate Odin. So he did not think about how an ordinary mole could roam around the battlefield without being crushed to death by the auras of the experts. William saw that the 3 dwarf experts and the orcs were fighting for real. One of the orcs' abdomen was cut open by an axe, and his intestines were exposed to the air. He spat out large mouthfuls of blood, along with many pieces of his internal organs. William couldn't help but laugh out loud. The shadow assassins, who were hiding in the dark, glanced at him again. They were wondering if they should blow the little mole to death. Swoosh! A heavy crossbow arrow came out of nowhere and hit him in the butt. The shadow assassins inhaled a breath of cold air. His face darkened, but he did not dare to move. Instead, he continued to pretend to be dead. But his attention was no longer on the laughing mole. He slowly moved to prevent his from being hit by another stray arrow. But an infuriating situation occurred. The The little mole seemed to have discovered that he was moving. It curiously came over. Meanwhile, Odom and the others had also arrived. The shadow assassins did not dare to act rashly. They could only continue to hide and wait for an opportunity to kill. So he watched as the little mole slowly crawled over his head, to his back, and even to the spot where the arrow had hit his butt. The shadow assassins felt that something was wrong. But he was too close to the other epic experts. He was afraid that once he revealed his aura, he would be exposed. So he decided to use his endurance skills. There was a saying, a real assassin had to endure what ordinary people could not. What was there to be afraid of when a mouse was lying in a scorpion's nest? There was a famous saying in the headquarters of the Shadow Assassin Alliance. A real assassin had to be expressionless even if someone took advantage of him while he was still a corpse. However, there was a squeaking sound. A heart-wrenching pain came from his buttocks, and the shadow assassin's face turned green. He could almost imagine that the little mole seemed to be eating his wound. It was a pity. William did not have this kind of interest. He just used his small claws and kept fiddling with the wound on his butt. The mole was an assassin, a top-notch assassin. But he was an assassin who had used the warrior's creed. Normal assassins wore leather armor. So even the leather armor of an epic assassin could not defend against the heavy crossbow arrow. William used his small claws to scratch the flesh around the mole's wound. The scene was very bloody and violent, but the prince was also very impressed by the mole's endurance. He had used his body to collide with the arrow, but the mole's body did not even tremble. He was definitely the trump card of the shadow assassins. So, he stretched out his evil claws again. It was a torture that lasted for 2 to 3 minutes. The shadow assassin was about to cry. Odom and his companions left during the fight. He did not dare to believe that his anus was still intact, but he could not bear it anymore. He suddenly turned around and stretched out his hand to grab the little mole. He wanted to crush the mole alive. However, an extremely terrifying scene unfolded before his eyes. His fingers, which could pierce through the shield armor, were pinched by the little mole's 2 small claws. Then, pom, 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 the little mole violently slammed the assassin. The shadow assassin was dumbfounded. He was in a daze, but he finally realized that the mole was not normal. His aura suddenly increased. Just when someone noticed the aura, the other experts only saw a black shadow piercing through the assassin's chest. At that moment, his corpse disappeared. The existence that had killed him had also disappeared without a trace. In fact, no one had even seen that figure. But many epic experts who witnessed this scene felt a chill in their hearts. Such a powerful assassin was hiding in the dark. They did not know if he was a friend or foe. It made them feel a little afraid. It was definitely a clash between 2 epic assassins hidden in the dark. However, another top assassin was instantly killed. Making an assassin disappear again was enough to prove how powerful that assassin was. Half an hour passed. The epic rank battlefield changed again. As Adolf and Legolas killed the 2 epic demons, many epic orcs did not continue to fight. Because of this half an hour of fighting, they had lost 2 epic fighters. One of them was killed by the Blue Mountain Dwarves, and the other was killed by the hidden assassin. At this moment, they just glared fiercely at the dwarves before taking out space teleportation scrolls and disappearing on the spot. However, the words that they shouted before they left reverberated in the sky. You 4 dwarf kingdoms, wait for me. The Orc Empire is not a pushover. If you trick us today, you will regret it for the rest of your life tomorrow. This inexplicable sentence made many dwarves a little confused. Many epic dwarves shrugged and didn't pay attention to the group of beastmen, treating them as if they were just saying it. But the prince's eyes lit up. He could not help but laugh. Why was he here? Of course, it was because of the god's avatar. His avatar was now a core member of the Orc Empire. He had a good relationship with the Icebound Sword Sage, Gur Te, and could even participate in various high-level meetings. He treated William as one of his own. Gur-Te wanted to send William as an assassin, but he chose to refuse. Gur-Te did not think much of it. He only thought that William was afraid of death and did not want to take risks. He only knew how to eat crystals, but that meeting did not make him leave. He also knew that a few assassins would appear here. He also knew that the assassins of the Dark Shadow Alliance would appear at the same time. The Orc assassins were in the open, while the Dark Shadow assassins were in the dark. It could even be said that the appearance of the Dark Shadow assassins was something that the Epic Orcs did not know. William did not know when this group of people would attack, but he knew that this group of Orc assassins had long hidden in the legendary continent. They had followed the Lonely Mountain team and were waiting for an opportunity to appear. He had created the Darkness Invasion to give Odom a chance to show off. But the Orcs, who did not know the truth, would definitely seize this opportunity. In this way, an unexpected conspiracy was formed. That was, the four dwarf kingdoms had treated the Orc Empire and the Dark Shadow Alliance as soft persimmons. They had tricked them. The Icebound Sword Sage, Altair, and the Dark Shadow Alliance could not understand the reason for being tricked. But the four dwarf kings could not explain it either. They did not dare to say that they had hired assassins. They did not know that the dark creatures would surround their legions. They had only sent reinforcements to rescue the legions. Who knew that Odom was here and had even helped them? Simply put, even His Royal Highness had never imagined such a ridiculous situation, but it had happened just like that. I only wanted to let Odom increase the affinity of the dwarves. Originally, it was only a single increase of happiness. But when the assassins appeared, the happiness was doubled. No, it was tripled. It was even quadrupled. William was overjoyed. He could even imagine it. He could imagine how this group of scheming dwarves would face the wrath of Gyurti. Sages? Did they think that they could deceive them? The Dark Shadow Alliance? This assassin organization had been in the legendary continent for thousands of years. They even dared to kill legendaries. Chapter 497. Ever since His Royal Highness used the Beast God Transformation Necklace, he was like Timo squatting in the grass, and he even had the skill of tribulation. Without the true eye, even a legendary big shot would not be able to detect that he had turned into a gopher. It was even more unimaginable that a gopher could have the strength of an epic rank. The assassin of the Dark Shadow Alliance was killed. The assassin of the Orc was killed by a sneak attack. When the news reached the ears of the four dwarven kings, their faces suddenly turned green. Outsiders who did not know better would have thought that there were sheep grazing on top of their heads. When the king of the Blue Mountain heard that one of his subordinates had killed the assassin of the Orc, he was completely on the verge of tears. He could not help but choke. "It's too hard for me. It's too hard for me." The other three kings gave him a comforting look. Although this was a big and round pot, and it was the Blue Mountain dwarves who were responsible for it, they were also in the same boat. If the Frozen Sword Saint was looking for trouble, he would definitely not only look for him. After all, the four of them were working together. It was impossible for them to abandon their allies just because of the threat of the saint. This was not in line with their interests, and they could not let them be defeated one by one just because of some pressure. The four dwarven kingdoms together might be able to face the pressure of the saint, but if they were to be separated, they would not be able to withstand it. What should we do now? Gert sent me a message again, saying that if I do not make things clear, he will come to me for an in-depth talk. The king of the Blue Mountain said anxiously. The king with the stiff beard glanced at him, signaling him to calm down. There was no point in going into an in-depth talk. Then he looked at the transmission scroll again and said in a deep voice, "The Dark Shadow Alliance sent a message. Their assassin was killed by another assassin, and the mission cannot be completed for the time being. However, they suspect that we leaked the information of the assassin. Now, not only do they want us to add the balance, but they also want us to compensate for their losses. Damn it, what about the Dark Shadow Assassin Alliance? Didn't they say that they wouldn't stop until the enemy was dead? We don't even know where they are. How can we expose the information? Give them a D***MN reward." The Iron Fist King sneered. The Stonefoot King sighed. The Dark Shadow Alliance does not have any saints, but they have at least 3 legendary assassins. If we piss them off, we might not even see tomorrow's sun. Now is not the time to piss them off. As for the remaining payment and compensation, Gert, don't fool him. Give him all the food, magic metal, and gold he wants. Just consider it a loss for us. The other three dwarven kings looked at each other and felt very unwilling. In this kind of situation, they had to give away their daughter as well as their wife. It was not a good feeling, but they could see clearly the tactics of the Lonely Mountain squad. This group of people was determined to get Lonely Mountain. He even secretly increased the favorability of the army's warriors. Damn it, they did not expect Odom, a small silver coin, to have so many tricks up his sleeves. The Iron Fist King pondered for a while and said in a deep voice, "Odom wants to go to Lonely Mountain, right? Let him go. I don't believe that he will dare to open the gate. But if he wants to delay time, we can spread the news that he does not have the bloodline of Lonely Mountain." Good. The Blue Mountain King clenched his small fist. Let's do it. I don't believe that the City of Dawn has the tricks of the Winged Sky City. If he dares to open the gate of Lonely Mountain, we will suddenly attack. Can the City Lord of Dawn teleport millions of soldiers to Lonely Mountain at any time? Let's do it. But our 3 legions each have less than 70,000 soldiers. Should we retreat now? The Stonefoot King suddenly asked. The Iron Fist Dwarven King shook his head and sneered. No, since the City of Dawn is willing to help, we cannot retreat. After dealing with the dark creatures, let the legions continue to delay the legions of the City of Dawn. Otherwise, the Desert Kingdom will be destroyed, and they will only be one step away from Lonely Mountain. The other 3 kings frowned, but they did not say anything. After all, they believed that even if the legions were rescued by the Dawn Army, they would not disobey the king's orders. What did a mere favor count for? The king's orders were more important than the heavens and the earth. But when they thought about the compensation they had to give to the Orc Empire and the Dark Shadow Alliance, they felt that they had suffered a huge loss. Should they add some copper to the gold coins? They were very confident in this method. Ever since the Orc assassins retreated, the epic devils of the Dark Creature Army were killed, and the Dark Creature Army started to disperse. Without the suppression of the high-level devils, even if the Dark Creatures were not very intelligent, they understood that the surface creatures were not that easy to kill. Naturally, they fled. Since they had come to the gods' world, they had to explore it. There was a saying that went like this: the world was so big that they wanted to explore it. The dark creatures were humans with ideals. They did not want to die on the spot without even eating a single creature. Therefore, this battle on the plains lasted for more than 10 hours. As hundreds of thousands of dark creatures dispersed in all directions, it finally came to an end. When Odom saw that the crisis had been resolved, he did not say much. He only bade farewell to the other dwarves and led the Lonely Mountain team westward. At this very moment, the players and the dwarf army were mixed together. The players did not attack the dwarf army. After all, with the sound of the horn, many dwarf warriors were excited to see the players rescue them. Both sides had a little tacit understanding. Many dwarves who were rescued on the spot even took out their weapons and gave them to the players. This made the players' impression of the dwarf brothers soar. To the players, as long as they could benefit from it, they would be brothers. The relationship between both sides was enhanced in a short period of time. It was as if they had been on the battlefield and visited brothels. However, at this moment, the epic dwarves who had not returned suddenly received news that they were to repel the Dawn Army and ensure that the borders of the Desert Kingdom were not to be violated. This was because the rescue mission of the Dawn Army had pushed them 6 or 7 kilometers into the Desert Kingdom. As the strongest epic dwarf and the confidant of the king of the Blue Mountain Dwarves, Cork could not believe that this order was given by the king. But he could not refuse the king's order. After hesitating for a while, he shouted gloomily, "The king has given the order. Draw your weapons and repel the Dawn Army." What? The dwarf army was in chaos. You want us to attack our allies? A dwarf threw his weapon on the ground. He was furious. How many people have died to save us? Now you want us to attack our allies? The dwarf warriors in the Legion could not help but shout. The Legion commander was in disbelief. He could not believe that this was an order from the king. The players were also in chaos, but they were not afraid of death. In addition, the Legion commander of the Dawn Army was their leader. The half-elf Legion commander glanced at the magic transmission scroll and said in a deep voice, "The city lord has given the order. Leave 30,000 people to set up camp here. The rest will go and eliminate the dark creatures. The City of Dawn is the messenger of justice and light. During the darkness invasion, we will not attack our allies. If they want to kill us, let them draw their swords first. Then let's set up camp. Damn, I didn't expect these dwarves to attack us. Some players laughed coldly. There were even some dwarves beside them. At this moment, most of the players looked at them with disdain. They did not expect them to be such people. I wonder who saved them just now. How many of us are left? At least 70,000 to 80,000 of us have gone offline to browse the forum. TSK, a group of ungrateful dwarves. I've learned something new. The group of players used their taunt skills, and some of the dwarves standing nearby turned red with anger. The players were on the verge of tears. It was obvious. The dwarf army did not react to the command of the epic expert, Chili. They did not draw their swords to attack the players. They even wanted to turn around and attack. When Chili saw this scene, he did not say anything else. When a general was outside, he did not obey the king's orders. It was difficult for him to understand the king's order. Even if Odom wanted to return to the Lonely Mountain, even if he was a member of the City of Dawn, and even if there were conflicts between them, Odom had just saved him. Not only did he not repay the kindness, but he also wanted to draw his swords against him. This was definitely not something that a dwarf would do. Hence, both sides set up camp facing each other. The distance between the two camps was less than 100 meters. The scouts and the guards of the camp could chat together. When the players saw that the dwarf army did not attack, they laughed and went over to join in the fun. It seemed like they wanted to have a friendly chat with the players. The guards of the dwarf camp wanted to stop the players from entering, but they were too embarrassed to say anything. Hence, they allowed the players to walk through the streets and do all sorts of friendly chats. Let's put it this way. As long as they were not enemies, the players dared to barge in and do some friendly chats, because they were dwarves and equipment. Moreover, there were many smithing sounds in the dwarf camp. Many players who had damaged equipment ran over to ask the dwarves to help them repair their equipment. Some of the sharp-tongued players wanted to see if there was a chance for a dwarf to forge a piece of equipment for them. If they succeeded, it would be worth it. Apart from this battlefield, the 7 continents of the gods were also attacked by the darkness invasion. The scale of the invasion was dozens of times larger than the first darkness invasion. The forum was bustling with activity, and the players were having a great time killing. But as time passed, the players soon discovered a problem. If the darkness invasion was so fierce, the Grand Duchy would not be able to withstand it. Even with the help of the players, they would not be a match for the darkness invasion. Many foreigners were bewildered. What was going on? They had just boosted the affinity of a Grand Duchy, and now the Grand Duchy was going to fall? Gosh, their hearts were in pain. They had suffered a loss. The version was forcing them to change factions. But why were the Chinese players in the legendary continent so rich? They were scattered in the 15 Grand Duchies. Logically speaking, they would not be able to withstand the darkness invasion. But why did the large NPC mercenary teams join in the fun? It seemed like they had stolen the missions of the Chinese players, but with the help of the NPC mercenary teams, the Grand Duchies would be able to defend themselves. This meant that the overall strength of the legendary continent would not be affected too much. But why did the mercenary teams of the continent not participate in this? Damn, it was unreasonable. He was not convinced. Report. William scanned the forum and did not know what to say. Was he going to say that the Arctic troops and the Eastern Mercenary Alliance were helping the Grand Duchies because they wanted to steal his business? It could not be helped. The mercenary teams of the City of Dawn were scattered all over the 4 regions. Those who did not want their trump cards to be invaded by other mercenary teams would be competitive. When other small mercenary teams saw that the City of Dawn, the Arctic troops, and the Eastern Mercenary Alliance were participating in the darkness invasion, and that the defense of the Grand Duchies was getting stronger, they also wanted to join in the fun. This was the reason why the Grand Duchy of the legendary continent and the darkness invasion were able to fight evenly. TSK. The butterfly effect was too great. Sorry. Chapter 498. The war between the Red Fire Kingdom and the Sandsea Kingdom was still ongoing. The darkness invasion could not stop the war between the two kingdoms. Up until now, the major events on the legendary continent had not changed much. The City of Dawn could still develop according to plan. The regular army helped the small tribes in neutral territories to defend against the darkness invasion for free. At the same time, they brought them back to the City of Dawn. The players were hired to help defend the territories of the Grand Duchies and engage in bloody battles. Everything was carried out in an orderly manner. William guarded the fortress of the Red Fire Kingdom. He seemed to be idle every day, but no one noticed that his eyes were often in a daze. The scene shifted to a handsome man. His body was glowing with faint light, and his aura was like that of a god. His every move had an extraordinary charm. Was he a god? Actually, it was true. He was a natural-born god. An existence like him was not like a creature of the mortal world. He also had a simple name. That was, Odin, I brought you out. Why are you still in a daze? Can't you have some fun? Taylor's voice suddenly sounded. Odin calmly glanced at him. He was too lazy to speak. His current persona was that of a tsundere, cold, and extremely arrogant god. He had to make good use of it. Taylor, who was a legendary professional and had the pale orc bloodline, did not feel anything. He was used to Odin's habit of ignoring him. Even though he knew that he was stronger than Odin, he knew that Odin would become stronger sooner or later. Odin might even become a legendary existence. He also knew that Odin did not like to talk, but he really cared about him. Every time Odin obtained a sacred vein, he would let Taylor eat some. 2 days ago, when the Dwarf King had given him a sacred vein, Odin had forced 1/3 of it to Taylor. Odin did not speak, but his eyes showed that if Taylor did not accept it, he would not take it either. Taylor was very touched, so he kept the sacred vein. He planned to give the remaining sacred vein to Odin after Odin had finished eating the other sacred veins. Taylor knew that Odin still wanted to eat. When he was not full, he would go out to hunt for food. He had caused a lot of trouble in the past 3 months. If it was someone else, they would have been sent flying by Gert's slap. Ever since the Orc Empire retreated from the legendary continent, they had found a decent-sized island in the endless ocean and settled 8 million of their people there. However, they were not on that island at the moment. Instead, he came to the Middle-earth in the west. This continent was almost the same size as the legendary continent. The most powerful forces were the 2 human empires, the Holy Empire and the Rose Empire. 4 elven kingdoms, 5 dwarf kingdoms, 2 harpy kingdoms. However, what was more important was that there was an orc empire, 2 orc kingdoms, and orc tribes all over the continent. At the end of the Second Era, the Beastmen suffered a great blow. However, aside from the fantasy continent and the impassable continent, even if the orcs of the other continents were severely suppressed, there were still 3 orc empires on the legendary continent, the Midland continent and the Faith continent. Now that the orc empire had been driven away from the legendary continent, the icebound sword sage Gert had found an island to establish his foothold on. He also intended to develop in the Middle-earth continent. Oh, it had to be said, in the face of the pressure from the various races on the continent, the saint-level orcs still sympathized with one another. They were all doing this for the sake of the orc race. The saint-level orcs of the Middle-earth continent expressed their support for Gert's arrival, but they were unable to provide him with much foothold. Simply put, if you want to fight, go ahead. I don't dare to. At most, I can cheer for you. Ever since I heard that you were defeated, I've become very timid. If not for the fact that my trump card is close to the Dwarf Kingdom and the Human Kingdom, I might have suffered the same fate. Therefore, Gert only intended to investigate the Central Earth to see if there was a place suitable for him to develop. If there wasn't, he would go to other continents. After all, as an ambitious saint-level orc, even if he knew that the gods' continents would be united sooner or later, he was unwilling to let his people live on a small island. Fortunately, although he had lost tens of millions of his people, the Dark World would give him sufficient compensation in the future. At least, he would not fall into a desperate situation. Ever since he came to the Middle-earth continent, Gert had disappeared almost all day. He had left again yesterday, and no one knew when he would return. Odin and Taylor were in the Orc Kingdom's capital, standing quietly on the city walls. Taylor did not know what Odin was thinking. He was only responsible for accompanying him and acting as an excellent bodyguard. They were commonly known as the Path Protector. After a long time, Odin suddenly said, "I want to develop believers in the Middle-earth continent." Taylor's eyes widened. "Brother, are you just saying that? Or are you really going to do it?" Odin pondered for a while, looked around, and said, "There are still too few orcs. In addition, I don't look like an orc, and the orc faith is not pure enough. This will not be easy for me to become a god in the future." Taylor revealed a look of sudden realization. He asked nervously, "You want to become a god, but you still need faith?" Odin raised his eyebrows slightly, but he still nodded and said, "I mainly rely on devouring magic power or veins, but faith is also the key reason why I can condense godhood." Godhood? Taylor seemed to have heard these two words from a long time ago. Saints did not need to condense godhood at all. As a top legendary professional, he still understood. However, he was still a little far from becoming a saint, and it seemed that he would not have such an opportunity in this lifetime. Odin found that he did not quite understand. So he explained, "Godhood is the core of a god's power. All the magic power I devour will be condensed here. You can think of godhood as my position. The stronger the godhood, the stronger I will be. And faith is the catalyst for godhood. It is not the key factor in godhood. In fact, I can also become a god without faith, and I can even become stronger. It can also cause the problem of not being able to continue advancing because of the lack of faith. But without faith, my cultivation speed will be very slow, and I will need to devour a lot of holy veins." "Sure," a voice suddenly sounded. No one knew when Gert had appeared beside the two of them. This old fox had hidden a long time ago, and when he had nothing to do, he would eavesdrop on the conversation between Odin and Taylor. He had some information in his mind, but his face was expressionless as he said, "I support you in developing believers here, but as a natural god, it seems a little dangerous for you to appear so openly in the central continent." Odin glanced at the faint brilliance on his body and said softly, "As long as I become a legend, the divine light on my body will be completely hidden. I can completely pretend to be a professional practicing Shinto. Even if a saint pays attention to me, they won't care too much. Even if they are really a threat to me, can I run away?" "Oh, so that's how it is. No wonder the light on your body is getting less and less." Gert nodded thoughtfully. This guy had devoured 7.5 holy veins so far, and the holy light on his body was getting less and less. Those were the holy veins that he had snatched after suffering countless beatings and curses. Every time Gert gave the holy veins to Odin, he looked reluctant, but the effect was obviously very good. Just after the 7th holy vein was devoured, his strength became stronger again, and the others could finally see this guy's face. It was that day. He gave himself a name, Odin. This name, it was carefully chosen by William, because in the gods' continent, there was no god named Odin. For example, the thunder god Thor. He was also born from heaven and earth, and he was not the son of Odin. But no matter what, anyway, he wanted to be Odin. Especially in front of the players who had heard of the Norse mythology, he was determined to be the father of Thor. Gert and the others did not know why he gave himself this name, but they felt that this name was not ordinary and seemed to be a little interesting. More importantly, on the day when Odin shouted his name for the first time, a crack suddenly appeared in the originally dark sky, and only a ray of golden light shone on his body. In this magical fantasy world, as a saint, Gert did not realize that Odin had done something, so he had to admit that Odin was something. In the future, he might really become the pillar of the orcs. In particular, gods were not humans. They could accept all kinds of beliefs. In addition, Odin had been in contact with the orcs since the beginning. Gert had basically let down his guard against Odin. But when Gert heard that Odin could escape from the pursuit of a saint at the legendary level, he did not know what to think. But in the end, he made up his mind and said in a deep voice, "Give me a few days and I'll settle the 2.5 sacred veins for you." "Okay." Odin nodded indifferently. Gert felt a little hurt when he saw Odin's ungrateful face. He felt that he had thrown away a lot of benefits for nothing. But he believed that Odin could not leave him. He also believed that even if Odin was a god, he still had feelings. During this period of time, he had been instilling in Odin the idea of treating the orcs well and treating the orcs as family and friends. Although the guy in front of him did not seem to have changed, and he had no prejudice against any race, he believed that with his persistence, he would definitely be able to befriend Odin in the future, especially when he discovered a problem. The orcs in the Middle Continent did not seem to be living a better life than the legendary continent. In addition, with the appearance of the Darkness invasion, the Central Continent did not seem to have any reaction, but the powerhouses were all on standby. They seemed to be worried that the Darkness forces might launch a large-scale invasion. So, he did not want to wander around here. He would be easily seen as a thorn in the flesh. If that happened, he would be killed directly. That would be terrible. But another advantage was that there were still many religions and shrines in the Middle Continent. It seemed to be beneficial for Odin's development and strength, especially when he felt that he could not feed this glutton to his heart's content. This little guy always stared at him with a gaze that said, "I want more, I want more." He was almost making a saint feel weak. So, he decided to feed Odin in one go so that he could quickly become a legendary professional. Then, he would immediately let him go. He had no choice. He could not afford to offend him.